and respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. With that, we will call our organizational meeting for October 15th, 2024 to order. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Councillor, are there any additions or deletions to today's organizational meeting agenda? CAO, are there any additions or deletions for today's organizational meeting agenda?
No additions or deletions, but when it comes to item 4.1, I just will have some clarifying point to make, but I don't think we need to do anything.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Council, can we have a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we adopt the organizational meeting of council agenda for October 15th, 2024 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. And Council, the motion on the floor is the council adopt the agenda as presented. Any discussion? Due to a electronic system issue, we're going to be voting by hand for the organizational meeting today. So all in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And that will take us to section 3 of the agenda and item 3.1, boards and committees. Public members application review closed per section 17 of FOIP. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we go into closed session.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, motion on the floor is the council move into closed session. All in favor? Unanimous. Council is in closed session. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. Thank you. And this organizational meeting of October 15th, 2024 will return to order. We are on section 4 and item 4.1, public members appointed to boards and committees. CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. All my colleagues are tallying up the other ones. We are recommending that the Intermunicipal Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, that council appoint John Lowell and Stephen Loney for a one-year term.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So moved, as the CAO worded, please.
In my mistake, through the mayor, that's a 3-year term for this committee.
Thank you, CAO Panasic and Councillor Magoon. Can you confirm that?
I can confirm.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is that council appoint the 2 members listed by CAO Panasic to a 3-year term to the Intermunicipal Subdivision Board. Is there any discussion? Okay, there we go. All right, the motion's up on the board now. So the motion on the floor is the council appoint John Lowell and Stephen Loney to the Intermunicipal Subdivision and Development Appeal Board for a 3-year term. Seeing no discussion, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now by hand. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, council. And admin. Now, CAO Panasic, next board, please.
Through the mayor to members of council, we're recommending that council appoint to the Hinton Youth Advisory Council Hayden Amdrud, Emily Burlett, Finn Crespin, Abigail Martin, Sterling Moselle, Hiral Tangri, Madison Testo, and Anika Whitman.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Council? Councillor Taylor.
So moved for the prescribed period.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And Secretary, we can get that up on the board there. Council, the motion on the floor is the council appoint to the Hinton Youth Advisory Council Hayden Amundon, Emily Burlett, Abigail Martin, Sterling Mosel, Hiral Tangri, Madison Tiesto, and Anika Whitman and Finn Crespian for a 1-year term. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. CAO Panasic, how about our third board?
Through the mayor, we are recommending that council appoint to the Hinton Municipal Library Board Susan Armstrong, Lila Moselle, Jace Rush, and Mike Story for a 3-year term.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Council? Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will, or so moved.
Thank you,
Council appoint the Hinton Municipal Library Board, Lila Moselle, Jace Rush, Mike Story, and Susan Armstrong for a 3-year term.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, the motion on the floor is the council appoint to the Hinton Municipal Library Board Lila Moselle, Jace Rush, Mike Story, and Susan Armstrong for a 3-year term. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. CAO Panasic, is there anything further for item 4.1?
I believe that's it.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. That will take us to item 4.2 of the agenda this evening, appointment of municipal assessor, and CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, we're recommending that council appoint Warren Powers of Powers and Associates as the assessor for the town of Hinton.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. And council? Councillor Taylor.
We delay this till the audit is finished and reported on,
CAO Panasic.
because taxes are pretty important to get done correctly, and that's what the audit will tell us if the current auditor is doing that correctly. So before we vote, where the audit was done in August, would we hear the report from the audit before we vote on the auditor?
Through the mayor to members of council, I would refer to Ms. Barbeau on that one.
Ms. Bourbeau?
Thank you. And through to council, this item is the one item that is holding up the provincial assessment auditor from submitting his report to his supervisor. It's my understanding just from verbal conversation, very clean audit that's going in, and this is an item that is missing. Just having the appointment by name rather than by company. So from perspective, it would be important that we make this motion this evening so that the assessor can move forward and submit his report.
Thank you, Ms. Bourbeau. Counselor Taylor, any follow-up?
No.
Thank you, Counselor Taylor. Counselor Haas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council appoint Warren Powers of the Powers and Associates as the assessor for the town of Hinton.
Thank you, Counselor Haas. And council, the motion on the floor is that council appoint Warren Powers of Powers and Associates as the assessor for the town of Hinton. Is there any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. That will take us to item 4.3 on the agenda this evening, council meeting schedule 2024-2025. CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, we're not recommending any changes to the upcoming year meeting schedule. So we are recommending that council approve the 24 to 25 council meeting schedule as presented in option 1, aligning with the council procedure bylaw, providing 2 regular council meetings and 2 committee of the wholes per month with no breaks for the summer months.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Council? Counselor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to take option 1, the council approve the 2024-2025 council meeting schedule presented as option 1 that aligns with the council procedure bylaw number 1153, providing 2 regular meetings and 2 committee of the whole meetings per month and for no breaks during the summer months. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Haas. Council, the motion on the floor is that council approve the 2024-2025 council meeting schedule presented as option 1, aligning with the council procedure bylaw number 1153, providing 2 regular council meetings and 2 committee of the whole meetings per month and for no breaks during the summer months. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 4.2 on the, or 4.3 on the agenda? Sorry. Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 4.4, council board and committee appointments. CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, we are recommending that council approve the 2024-2025 councilor board and committee appointments. The updated list is included on page 35 for the council representation on our different boards and committees by Mayor Nissen.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Council? Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of information. On page 33 of 44, it's just a mistype spelling of my last name. And then I'll make the recommended action from administration that council approve the 2024-2025 council boards and committee appointments.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is that council approve the 2024-2025 boards and committee appointments. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. That will take us to item 5.1 on the agenda, the call for adjournment, and Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd move that we adjourn the organizational meeting of council for October 15th, 2024.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. And council, the motion on the floor is to adjourn the organizational meeting of council on October 15th, 2024 at 4:26 p.m. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for taking part in the organizational meeting. We will now move over to our regular council meeting for October 15th, 2024. Do we need to pause the recording and restart? No, you're good with that? Okay. Thank you. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. With that, we will call this regular council meeting for October 15th, 2024 to order. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Council? No, council, any changes to the agenda? Seeing nothing. CEO Panasic, any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No changes from administration.
Thank you, administration. Council? Councillor Hawes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. And council, the motion on the floor is the council adopt the agenda as presented. And we should be able to make this work online now. So let's give our voting system a go. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Taylor in favor by hand, and Councillor Race in favor by hand. It's okay, we'll try to get those logged in, but that is carried unanimously. That will take us to section 3 of the agenda this evening, council minutes for adoption. Council? Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we adopt the agenda, regular council meeting minutes for October 1st, 2024, and the committee of the whole meeting, October 28th, 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. And council, the motion on the floor is that council adopt the regular council meeting minutes from October 1st, 2024, and the committee of the whole meeting minutes from October 8th, 2024. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Race and Councillor Taylor in favor by hand. And that motion is carried unanimously. So we'll take us to section 4 of the agenda this evening, Citizens Minute with Council. Minute with Council provides an opportunity where residents can address council regarding issues, events, celebrations, or concerns. To ensure a constructive and welcoming environment, please adhere to the following guidelines. Keep your remarks concise, limited to 1 minute. Address the chair of the meeting when speaking to council. Avoid asking questions as this is not a Q&A session, and maintain a respectful tone and language. First up for Minute with Council this evening, we have Curtis Anderson. If we could just get the presenter microphone turned on by someone who can control that. Thank you.
Hello, Council. I'm here to speak about my opinion on the proposed changes to the short-term rental bylaw and how this may or may not solve the problem you're hoping it will solve. From my understanding, the proposed changes involve setting a cap on the number of standalone short-term rentals, and that this decision might be based off of a feedback survey. From the survey, I read that there's kind of 3 key topics that stood out to me: people's experience with disruptive guests, reducing housing availability, and the town's failure to enforce current regulations. Now, the first and last points kind of go hand in hand. I know from experience, most hosts try to respect their neighbors and neighborhoods, ensure guests respect house rules, including the town's bylaws, such as quiet hours. If this is disturbing neighbors, there are resources in place that could mitigate this. Whether it's a short-term rental, long-term rental, or owners, if they're disrupting your peaceful enjoyment of your property, you can call bylaw. We have laws in place that protect neighbors regardless of who's next door. If this town's unable to enforce these rules, then why are we pointing the finger at entrepreneurs who have been told that this is viewed as a legitimate business if you have the license? It kind of sounds like instead of actually enforcing these bylaws, we're just going to cap the amount of businesses allowed to open, which kind of ties into the proposed fee increase for non-compliance. While at face value, these increased fees make sense based on the business license fee. But let's not forget that the license fee was a made-up number. Some councillors had an appetite for higher fees. I recall one councillor pushing the increased use of town services by short-term rentals, and when asked which town services they use more of, he said, "I don't have to justify which ones, they just do." Now, the main point is the reduced availability of housing. As a citizen and a realtor / property manager in town, what does this mean? Are we talking about long-term rentals, houses to purchase? I just want to look at the big picture for a second, and these are some stats from the Government of Alberta website. Between July 2023 and 24, Alberta's population expanded by over 204,000 people, 4.4% growth. Between April 1st and June 30th of this year, 46,000 people, 1% growth. 70% of that is international migration, 20% interprovincial, provincial, and 1% is a natural increase. So we're seeing a huge increase in the amount of people coming to Alberta, but we're kind of pointing the finger at the little guy, saying maybe 100 or so of these homes are the problem for Hinton, whereas this is more of an Alberta or Canada-wide problem. Furthermore, let's look at the type of properties that people have purchased for short-term rentals versus what is considered an affordable rental. What is an affordable rental? I think that this term is relative to the market that you're in. However, a lot of people seem to get stuck on the exact dollar amounts. So let's call it $1,500 a month. What privately owned properties can people even purchase and rent out at $1,500 a month? A $150,000 condo, which is quite low in our condo market right now, would translate to roughly $750,000 a month mortgage with a traditional mortgage at current rates. After condo fees, property tax, and insurance, you're out roughly $1,300 a month. How many condos are short-term rentals? 0, because no condo board in town allows short-term rentals. So then you start looking at higher price point homes, even entry-level homes, 300,000, give or take 50,000. These don't translate to affordable long-term rentals. While some might translate to long-term rentals, they won't be in that affordable price point. So when people are saying it's taking away from the affordable housing, I don't think that restricting these is actually going to add any back into our affordable rental pool. Now, if you're shutting the door on short-term rentals, saying this is causing an increase in housing costs, you need to tell Mondi, CN, and all the residents of Jasper that they're also not allowed to expand their businesses here or move here because it's increasing the cost for our locals. We're going to see over 200 jobs, give or take, from CN, and I've heard roughly the same from Mondi in their proposed development with the mill. That's drastically going to affect our housing market, no matter how you look at it. So even if all 120 or so short-term rentals right now were to go away and turn into houses to purchase or rent for residents, we're still short 300 homes. I think that the real focus needs to be on development. We need to build more homes, put pressure on developers who sit on large amounts of land for decades, work with those developers to actually get things moving. Whatever the hurdles are there, focus needs to be on that and actually increase our tax base and grow our town. Do we want Hinton to grow and develop, or are we keeping the 10,000 population sign there for another few decades? This proposed cap isn't just about short-term rentals and everyone's fear of the new business. It's about Hinton's economic growth as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank
Next up for Minute with Council, we have Roxanne Janke.
It's Roxanne. I'm a local realtor in town, and I'm here with my husband, who's a residential home builder. It isn't exactly obvious to us why council's considering capping the number to only 100 short-term rentals. There seems to be no clearly defined single reason why you want this, and certainly no mutual consensus on what that number should be. Perhaps it's because you're basing decisions on anecdotal information instead of statistical data. It seems to me that regulation should be based on the actual state of our local market and not on things that are happening in places like Canmore. It was brought out in the last meeting that Canmore has 770 short-term rentals, which is a really scary number. But the full picture of that situation was never explained, and that number was very misleading. Prior to Airbnbs, 30% of their homeowners were already not permanent residents in that community, but instead they were vacation homeowners. So that means that 770 homes did not come flying off the market to become STRs, but instead most were already owned and left vacant for the majority of the year before being converted into these short-term rentals, and are now actually being put to good use, accommodating visitors and growing their economies. Hinton doesn't have a huge population of vacation home owners, and that's just one of the reasons that we're different than Canmore, and why we haven't seen the number of STRs jump up to anything near that number. Instead, we have 128 people that you guys have indicated who are renting fairly prosperously for about 4 months of the year. And even though some pay for a full year STR license, they often rent their home to short-term workers in the area for extended periods of time. And they run shorter leases for long-term rentals during the other 8 months of the year. There was information brought out that long-term rent is rising due to STRs. The truth is that high interest rates are causing mortgage payments to double for many property owners. And the level of inflation in our country is driving rents up. Food at the grocery store has doubled, and that can't be blamed on Airbnbs either. In fact, short-term rentals have very little impact on rising prices right now. Also, there was information brought up that many of these homes are hosting 600 to 800 people per year, and it was stated that these guests were exhausting our water, sewer, roads, causing heavy traffic, etc., which really isn't accurate since these homes are rarely occupied full-time compared with other residential properties. Not to mention, tenants usually show up in one vehicle, where most families of 5 have multiple vehicles. Also, according to that math, if 128 non-principal Airbnbs are hosting 600 to 800 people, there would be almost 100,000 guests in these homes over the course of a single year. That doesn't feel like a true statistic to me, but instead a skewed piece of anecdotal information meant to tilt the argument in the other direction. My point is there's a lot of partial and misleading information being looked at and considered in these arguments. I think it's a very big decision to make and a very serious restriction being considered, and it should not be done unless you have clear and measurable objectives. I ask you, do you know how much of a difference it will make to the number of affordable listings on our MLS? What % of this housing shortage can be definitively blamed on STRs? Are you sure that the current housing shortage isn't just a free market cycle based on the massive amount of immigration and interprovincial migration that Alberta is currently experiencing, or the expansion of certain large corporations in our community? Do you know the rate of growth of the short-term rentals? After all these years, we only have 128. How many are being added per year? Very importantly, are you even certain that so many homeowners are out of compliance with the bylaw? Are you certain that your AI intel is accurate? Because it doesn't seem accurate to me. How many units operate as STRs in the summer and double as long-term rentals for the other 8 months of the year? Was there a housing study done? Where did the number 100 come from? I've heard the mayor express that he would like it to be at 20-something, a councillor that they would prefer 50, and others at 130. This doesn't sound like a consensus, but just random numbers being thrown out. Other than the 130, which was suggested, and it seemed that it was a kind suggestion and at least was in direct consideration of the livelihoods of those who have already invested in these properties and in the growth of our community. My hope is that you truly feel that if you truly feel the need to create a cap on the short-term rentals, that you will consider doubling it. And most importantly, that you would at least have some of the answers, and at the very least, provide market-based research to back your predictions instead of stories. With no evidence of real beneficial results in similar markets and having no real measurable objectives and making heavy regulations, it just doesn't feel very responsible to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Janke.
Appreciate it.
And that will take us to section 5 of our agenda this evening, delegations and presentations. Item 5.1, we have the STARS presentation presented by Glenda Farndon. Glenda?
Well, it's my pleasure to bring you your annual update. And again, formally thank you for many years of continuing to be a partner with STARS. This next year, STARS is going to celebrate 40 years of serving Albertans. And that is largely due to partnership. In a worst case scenario, STARS is your best hope. And we've been able to provide this service because of partnership. The clicker, right side? Sorry, I thought that the buttons would work. Oh, this one? Keeps coming up. No. And difficulties, my fault.
Yeah, we're not having the best luck with our technology today, are we?
Yeah, sure.
That looked successful.
There we go. Thank you very much. So I'm sure that all of you have heard the wonderful news that we now have signed another long-term affiliation agreement with Alberta Health Services for another 10 years. Previously, we had a 10-year agreement which expired in 2020. That was at 20% government funding. Now it is going to be at $15 million block funding. And so this covers about 44% of our operational budget, leaving 56% that still must be fundraised each year. Of that, of course, is our very beloved STARS Lottery, which has generated over the years approximately $10 million net each year to help offset those costs. So still a lot of fundraising left. We have many long-term community events, long-standing ones, some even on the helicopter, represented on the helicopter. And then, of course, our corporate partners and our municipal program that you are a part of and have been long-standing regional leader. So I wanted to give you an idea here. Where are we at now with our municipal program across Alberta and into northeastern BC? So since I last presented to you, we have welcomed 10 more rural municipalities or counties and municipal districts, 14 more urban municipalities like the town of Hinton. So we are currently at 94% in partnership. So this shows you, these are those that are currently still contributing less than the minimum $2 per capita that we have requested. This shows you everyone that is contributing at the minimum $2 per capita or higher up to $90 per capita and everything in between. So you can see that we are at 94% of the entire province, including a unanimous support in northeastern BC. These are our municipal leaders, 9 municipal leaders now. So they have all moved to a fixed rate of support on standing motion. We are a line item in their protective services budget each year, and they are all represented on the helicopter, their logos. They have reached more than $500,000 cumulative giving over the years. Some are surpassed $3 million in support over many, many years. This year, or last year, we welcomed Sturgeon County as a municipal leader. And this year in June, we had a logo unveiling for Birch Hills County as well. The red outlines represent those that have complete regional partnership, meaning that every town and village that lies within a county's boundaries is a supporter of STARS along with their county or municipal district. So you can see that that is very much growing as well. We are really building these regional partnerships. We are very grateful to the town of Hinton. You have been a regional leader for several years now, and we very much appreciate that. The exclamation marks in the navy represent town of Hinton and town of Edson as regional leaders. The white areas that are remaining, there's 4 in total in the entire province, are those that are still currently non-supporters. This is a bit of a year in review. So we are now surpassed 37,000 emergency requests received every year. More than 60,000 missions have been flown. We are averaging 102 requests per day, $11.4 million per base in Alberta now. So with the rising demand and increasing costs and fuel costs, all of that, it has increased to $11.4 million per base. On the right-hand side, you'll see the incident types. So about 80%, if we just kind of round up, 20% each basically for cardiac and stroke, for vehicle incident, other medical types of incidents, and trauma. So that's the majority of what STARS answers to. STARS is borderless. We are 6 bases across Western Canada. We're averaging 11 missions every day across those 6 bases. More than 60,000 missions flown to date. Our air medical crew are cross-trained for each other's roles, the advanced life support paramedic, as well as the ICU nurse. As well, all crew and all out assets cross all borders. So we can move around our helicopters as to when they are coming up for their 400 or 800 hour maintenance. And then some of the areas that have lesser demand, then they will move around, but every single helicopter is equipped identically. So they have the exact same working environment, no matter what helicopter arrives that's going to be. So that is also a safety concern as well as production, right? And so in safety and quality assurance in having the same exact working environment for our crew. So this is a snapshot of a day in the life of our STARS air medical crew. To give you an idea, when I said 11 missions per day on average, but we've had several days that are 18 or 20 missions that we've been dispatched on. So this gives you kind of an idea. With the description, you can see all the different very critical situations that our crew have to be ready to answer. This is a day in the life of STARS medical crew. The disposition shows those that we have patient transported by STARS. Number 3, the patient, we brought the specialty team, the NICU specialty team for this particular patient. So that patient was transported by ground with the specialty team. We have number 6, mission was canceled. There was, once upon arrival, it was not deemed necessary. So the patient went by ground. We did not transport. Number 7, a workshop explosion. That was canceled. All decisions are made by our transport physicians. So they're all medically driven. Every single decision. We make all the arrangements for any critical patient, regardless of the mode of transport. Number 10, you'll see out of Grand Prairie. That patient was transported by ground with STARS AMC. So I don't know the particulars of that. It might have been a bariatric patient or some other circumstances. So our crew also will go on Alberta Health Services fixed wing or ground transport with a critical patient. So this is just kind of to give you a slight overview of what our crew face on a daily basis. Here's statistics almost for a full 5 years, up to September 30th of this year. So you can see that we cover every single portion of Yellowhead County. The county averages in total 36 missions per year. 37% of the mission demand is for Hinton. So it's pretty much equal between Hinton, Edson area, and then all of the other county areas, kind of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, as far as where the demand is coming from. Your critical interfacility transfers as well. Many of these are critical incidents where that patient was delivered to the nearest hospital by ground ambulance, but because it is of critical nature, then STARS was called to get these patients. So it really does give you a solid overview of what's happening throughout your areas. Now, this is an update to the postal code project that I brought you before last year. So within the last year, since the last update, 11 area residents within Yellowhead County boundaries have been flown. So you'll see all the numbers there below as to how many were flown. 266 total area residents since 2010. And if, again, on the right-hand side, you'll see the blue outline of Yellowhead County's boundaries and all of the red dot locations that are outside of those boundaries. 65 residents were picked up in Hinton. 201 residents were picked up in 37 other locations in 2 provinces. Accidents and illness happen anywhere. This is a testament to that. Your residents have access to STARS all across Western Canada. And this is brand new news. This was approved last year for us in October. Massive hemorrhage protocol. Now you know that we are a leader in innovation between night vision goggle, more than 20 years. We were the very first civilian organization in Canada, bringing blood on board now, universal blood. This has been more than 10 years. Again, we were the very first in North America to bring this life-saving measure on board. We've always carried 2 units of universal blood. We've seen an increase in severe trauma cases lately. So we've now increased universal blood to 4 units of universal blood that we carry. Now this massive hemorrhage protocol is in place. That is 2 different blood products, Octaplex and fibrinogen. Between these 2, one reverses anticoagulation and one promotes blood clotting. So once we have a severe trauma patient, after we've given the 2 units of blood, we can now apply these 2 blood products and then give the other 2 units of blood, which buys that patient additional extra time without bleeding out, because now that's able to help to process reversing the anticoagulation and also building blood clots before we give the second 2 units of blood. So this is a Canadian first. Once again, STARS is the first to bring this life-saving measure on board as part of our critical care program. And of course, after 37 years in STARS history, we flew our longest mission. It was for a hunter in the rugged mountains of most northern BC. He suffered a major heart attack on a riverbank. It was at dusk. We were absolutely the only entity that could reach this patient. No other entity, search and rescue, anything, could be flying at night. We were bringing the intensive care unit environment to that patient. More than 2,400 liters of fuel, more than 1,700 kilometers flown, more than 8 hours total flight time, and more than 5 hours in the air managing this critical patient, and 1 life saved. It's a great news story. He was reunited with his Grand Prairie crew, him and his family as well. They say that this particular mission, if you flew it in a straight line, was like flying from Calgary to Los Angeles. It was an incredible feat, but 1 life saved, and proof again of STARS capabilities to provide critical care anywhere. And in closing, I'd like to say thank you, Town of Hinton. Last year, you had moved to a fixed rate of support at $20,000 per year on a standing motion, meaning that you will acknowledge and try to provide for us every year in your annual budget. We appreciate that very much, because that is what gives us that sustainability that we require as the mission rate continues to increase and grow. Collectively across the province, we are generating now $2.3 million annually just from the municipal program. That's a significant amount in showing partnership. But more so, we can all be proud because we are working together to ensure that every Albertan has access to the highest level of critical care available. We are now providing physical and virtual response. That is a key asset to your local hospitals, in the fact that even if the STARS may be on another mission and cannot come, our STARS transport physicians are available 24/7, and they can virtually connect with your medical professionals to help medical and procedural guidance with a critical patient. Together, we are enhancing rural healthcare. Your residents have access to STARS 24/7 all across Western Canada. And more importantly, we're approaching 40 years as a charitable entity, no cost to the patient. That's the prime reason. A life is saved every day, but it's your partnership that's made that possible. And with that, I would like to take this opportunity to present you with a new plaque with the brand new helicopter, acknowledging your continued long-term partnership with STARS, that you are doing something very special for the health and safety of Town of Hinton residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Farndon. And when you're done your presentation, we'll take a little recess for a bathroom break and to take a photo, okay? Thank you. And council, any questions for our presenter this evening? Councillor Taylor.
Excuse my ignorance. How does STARS fit into our emergency departments that aren't open for periods of time? Like there's 8 nights in a row or something where it's not opened. What happens if a critical patient comes into the emergency department? The nurses are there, but there's no doctor there. Does STARS fit into that scenario?
Yes, we are assisting other communities like that are having the same problems. So whether it's the nurses or the physicians, whoever is on staff, if you are presented with a critical patient, you directly call the Link Center and you are hooked up with a transport physician. And then they will help you to, and that's another asset of the virtual care. So that they can actually, there's given a secure encrypted link, like by either laptop at the hospital or their cell phone, whatever the case may be, so that they can actually show the patient and their condition to our transport physicians to help make that determination on if it may be a STARS call or it, may some other resources. Our Emergency Link Center, they know every available resource throughout the province. So they'll know where the local ground ambulance is, the nearest one, whether or not fixed wing is available, whether or not it needs to be a STARS call, like all of these things they take into consideration when making a decision for a critical patient.
So is that likely what an emergency room nurse would do as their first call? Call you guys?
Is to call the Emergency Link Center if they feel that it is of a critical situation. We can be of assistance to help determine that.
Right, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you again for coming. You are a wonderful ambassador for STARS. I do have to ask you, in regards to the blood, the 4 units of blood that you carry, to me, blood is either negative or it's positive. What type of blood?
Universal blood is O negative. Carry 2 units of O negative blood. Now they've changed that to accommodate some other patients. So now we have 2 units of O negative and 2 units of O positive. So between the two, and then of course the 2 new blood products, the massive hemorrhage protocol.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks again, Glenda.
Yeah.
And I apologize if I'm missing it because I'm looking through the numbers here. I'm just curious how many are being picked up in Yellowhead County is, I guess, what I'm looking at, not in Hinton, not in Edson, but in the county specifically, because there's a number of places I see here, but can you comment on that?
Sure, I was trying to get this to go back. Like when we're talking, first I want to clarify, just in case there is not any misunderstanding. When I'm showing you these statistics, these are missions flown within Yellowhead County boundaries. So it could be anybody that's from your rural neighbors, your bordering neighbors. It might be someone from Ontario that's visiting family, right? So it's just what missions have been flown within the boundaries. And then the different, pilots code to the nearest community or landmark where the occurrence happened when they pick up the patient. So that's why it's saying near here, near there, right? Aside from the critical transfers that are attributed directly to the hospital. So with this, I would say that on average, it's like 57 in total for Edson scene calls and hospital, 57 in total for Hinton and scene calls, and about 55, I think I told, for all the other areas that would encompass Yellowhead County. So you're about 1/3 each equal in what actually happens in your area.
And that, if I may to clarify, 1/3 and 1/3 is paying into this program, the other third is not. So I guess how I look at it is Yellowhead County subsidizing, or sorry, Edson and Hinton are subsidizing those calls to Yellowhead County. So, I just still think that Yellowhead County is not being responsible to this program and to the rest of the communities as well. Completely honest, to see that. So I'm hoping that they see the light and come on board with the rest of the community, because this is a vital thing for our province. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my question was going to be along the same lines. Thank you, by the way, Glenda. Lovely.
Yes.
Great to see you again.
Thank you.
I ask you every year if Yellowhead County has stepped up and decided that they're going to contribute money to help STARS continue to operate. Have they?
No, they declined me again. I recently went to them again and now they're looking at budget. I did get, one counselor did move motion that he wanted it discussed at the budgets.
Yep.
And so I believe that they are, but I have not heard anything and probably won't until early next year. But my request for last year was declined.
If I could follow up, Mr. Mayor. So that's promising to hear that they're going to talk about it at budget at least. So I would like to request that any Yellowhead County citizens who might be watching or listening, if you think that STARS is worthwhile to have available in the region, and that you think that it's worth tax dollars going to support STARS to be able to do missions in our area, reach out to your Yellowhead County councillor and let them know. Try and tell them, yes, we support this and we're fine with you committing some money to make sure that STARS has the funding to be able to come to our area. It's been said a few times by a few people, Edson and Hinton put money in every year to make sure that STARS is funded, and Yellowhead County, to my knowledge, the whole time I've been on council, never has. And I think it's important that they do. They need to step up. A lot of these missions are their citizens in their areas. I think it's important, and I'd like citizens to express to their county councillors if it's important to them to make sure their councillors know. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council. Thank you very much, Ms. Farndon. And as I mentioned, we've got one more presentation. We'll take a recess and we'll take a photo with the plaque, okay?
That would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The latest in the newsletter and a brand new 40th anniversary calendar, which has got lots of wonderful tidbits, and a set for your fire department, please, if you would pass that on, because we can't do what we do best without them.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda, we have item 5.2, the Hinton Disc Golf Association.
Well, good afternoon, fine citizens of Hinton. My name is Tracy and I'm here on quite short notice to present to you on behalf of the Hinton Disc Golf Association. As you mentioned earlier, you've had technical issues. Well, that's been the story of my last couple of weeks. So please bear with me in this. Our goal is to continually grow the sport of disc golf, as it is an accessible, inexpensive activity that encourages physical movement, exercise, and community. Hinton Disc Golf is one of the quickest growing sports during the pandemic lockdown. It's challenging for many courses right now. There's courses popping up everywhere and communities to sustain the amount of people that are coming out to play the game and learn it. Sponsorships and grants. that is a lot of our funding. I know since the town has come on board, our sponsorships from local businesses has decreased. Whether that be of awareness that the town is backing the course now too, or maybe the efforts haven't been out there in town for sponsorships. Again, if I let you know my background, I was on the board when we started. So 2017, we commenced. Then I was off for a while and I'm back on again. And the direction of the course hasn't always been in agreement with everyone. Some people want to keep it a local course, their friendly course, and others want to grow and expand it. Our hope is that it does become more of a tourist attraction, growing the community and people visiting our community. The Wicked Woods Tournament is held every year. This was our 4th year. We have amateur and professional players attending the event. This is where we do gain a lot of support from local businesses. They're always happy to see we're putting this on. Again, I would like to reiterate that our course, well, that's coming up too. Our course rating is 4.5 to 5. It's generally right now at a 4.6. It is rated as one of the top 50 courses in Canada to play. It's extremely challenging, offers a great hike, and for beginner and advanced player, there's always a new challenge out there, so it doesn't get boring. League night runs every Thursday night from April to September. This is for everyone, males and females. Various skills. Next year, we will be looking to boost our the numbers of people we have coming out to league night. And the reason I word it like this is because I am trying to encourage more females and juniors to come out and play. So in the springtime, I've learned at the information fair that many parents are interested in their kids playing perhaps in a league, a short league, in the springtime when hockey and ringette are done, which I am happily available to do. This year's challenge, majority of course cleanup and volunteers. I think more so it's the opinions of people that are cleaning the course. So to one, a wood pile is no big deal. To another, it's a big deal. They want it moved out of the way. So just coming to some agreements with that. For the future, we're looking at expanding the course to accommodate at least another 9 baskets. Wooden tee boxes to replace them with concrete, or at least something that works a little better. Our boxes tend to get slippery when in wet. And for safety purposes, we want something more sustainable. I have noticed in my competition that cement tee pads are too grippy, so I'll torque my knee out, having bodily injury. So a lot of at Worlds and Nationals now are going to green turf. So, and that's easily picked up and stored away, brought out when needed. You can move your tee pads around as well. So more versatility that way. Board members working on proposal to bring an elevated tournament such as Canadian Nationals to put Hinton on the map. Hinton is on the map currently. We have had some traveling to Worlds. So over to the States where we've met international players. There were 18 countries represented there. And we've had a lot of conversations about our course. Because of Charles and I's finish, we're both from Hinton. We've both finished top international players in our divisions. People are very looking forward to come playing our course. It's provided that training ground that we can excel in competition. The budget. Well, income balance income and balance sheets are attached. You can see we don't have a whole lot of money in the bank, depending on what you're looking forward to do. We have purchased more equipment so that we don't have to contract out grass mowing and tree cutting, you know, to make sure it's safe. We have a lot of trees falling down out there. We don't want visitors or anyone in town getting hurt. This year's successes include 4 Hinton Knights attending Canadian Nationals in Clearwater. One defending her national title, that would be me, FA 40 for another. And yeah, another, the junior 18-year-old finishing second. As well, there was a Western tour that's with BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. And I finished on top with that, setting record numbers. So again, it's our course, I think, and the support of the town of Hinton with that course. I won't speak to these as I'm not the treasurer, but the numbers are there. And yeah, in the past, we've looked at wanting concrete pads, which would cost at least $10,000 to install for 18. So again, always looking at alternative routes. Alternative baskets, the baskets, last time we priced them out were $500 a piece. So that's where the sponsorships prior paid for the baskets. So.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Council, do we have any questions for our presenter this evening? Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to congratulate you on all your successes. We were able to follow you when you were down in the States. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I also think it's wonderful that you clarified that we are 1 in 50 of being the best in Canada, because I have told people we are the top 5. So I'm glad you corrected. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Taylor.
Congratulations on your tournament play, and we get, I think, good bang for the buck for the money we give you. In that your parking lot seems full on Saturday and Sundays and other times. The comment that you did say that caused me some concern is how we give you money and then other sponsors don't give you money, because I don't think we ever intended that we would replace those. But if they're not giving money because people in your club aren't asking them for it, I'd be concerned about that. Because to me, a measure of community support is not just council giving money, but it's people in the community being able to give you money.
Absolutely. And currently the board, I guess any board can have some difficulties, but our president has just stepped down, stating he hasn't had the time to put the efforts in, as well as, well, the reason I'm here is because I'm committed to the board or to the disc golf course. And having said that, that's where volunteers can run a little thin on trying to get everything done. But certainly moving forward, we will be out there with those letters for the advertising. I do believe a lot of people do get, the businesses do get support from people playing and seeing their logo on baskets. What I've brought up is that we need to be able to explain what sponsorship is for and have a consensus of that. So the board being a little scattered at the moment is the biggest issue, I guess. So just bring it back together. But we do have 3 people fully committed to the course.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say thanks for all the hard work that goes into maintaining the course. I know trying to keep the fairways clear of debris, fallen trees, making sure that it's presentable. Just as a citizen in town, I'm there with our staff members, there with my kid. We enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. It's easy to do and it's busy. So thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, anything further for our presenter this evening? Seeing nothing, thank you very much, Tracy, and congratulations on your tournaments.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, council will take a 10-minute recess or 10-minute break to use the
as the budget workshop dates, with meetings to be held in the committee room starting at 4:10 and ending no later than 8:30 p.m.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for administration. I'm fine with the 8:30 PM time slot. I guess I'm just curious, if we go from 4:10 to 8:30, then it's over the 4-hour mark. For a 20-minute difference, I think wouldn't that save us some time if we set the time to 8:10 PM?
CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor and member of the council, yeah, I have no problems with that change.
It's a question for council. I'm good either way, but we would save some fees if we capped it at 8:10 as opposed to 8:30.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. It's a good consideration. Any councillors willing to make that motion? There's no motion on the floor, so someone can make that motion with an adjusted time. No problem. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll give it a shot. I'd like to move that council set Wednesday, November 6th and Thursday, November 7th as budget workshop dates, with meetings to be held in the committee room starting at 4:10 and ending no later, than 8:10. And just in speaking to it briefly, I think the total over 2 days of 40 minutes, it's time that we are likely going to use at another date anyway as we work through the normal budgetary process. So I see no reason to sort of soak up that extra 40 minutes and we save the community some money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Magoon, that was a good catch there. So I'll be in favor of this. I just want to note on the 6th, we'll have to duck out for about an hour to previous work obligations, but I'll keep it probably short and get back as quick as I can. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Taylor.
These times look okay, but if it's like last year and you come to us with a 14% tax increase, I think we're going to need more time. Is there going to be flexibility for that later on?
CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, yes, the first meeting in the budget workshop is all of the OBCs or potential changes. So it'll be the same process as we did last year. There'll be plenty of time in the tail end of this to make the decisions on the all of our operating business cases, capital plans. There'll be plenty of time built into this timeline.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Councillor Taylor, did you have follow-up?
Yeah, so the arm wrestling sessions will come later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, the motion on the floor is that council set Wednesday, November 6th and Thursday, November 7th as budget workshop dates, with meetings to be held in the committee room starting at 4:10 PM and ending no later than 8:10 PM. Is there any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Taylor voting in favor by hand. Councillor Ostashik voting in favor by hand and frantically trying to log in. That is carried unanimously. No problem there. That happens to all of us on these things. Council, is there anything further for item 6.1 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.2, short-term rental bylaw amendment. CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the members of council, I will turn this over to Ms. Walker, but before I do, just as a heads up, the next, I believe, 3 items are all related to short-term rentals. They just may be located in different bylaws. So our ask is that what we do for one, that we mirror for others. So if we get first reading, we just ask that we be consistent through the other bylaws if council is willing to provide readings on. Well, we just don't want one to pass others and create some inconsistent bylaws. With that, I will turn this over to Ms. Walker.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Ms. Walker.
Thank you and good evening, Your Worship and members of council. So the short-term rentals bylaw amendment is before you this evening to apply a cap on non-principal resident short-term rentals at 100, as well to allow for external secondary suites as eligible short-term rentals within our bylaw. Administration is recommending all 3 readings tonight of the short-term rentals bylaw number 1162-1. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Council? Councillor Taylor?
I'd like to put a motion forward that we remove section 4 from the bylaw. That removes the cap of 100.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Would you like to speak to it?
Sure. Yeah. Some of this I said before. Some of it I think we said tonight. The assertion that short-term rentals for rent or short-term rental regulation affects affordable housing is not supported with data or even larger scale anecdotal data from other areas. Certainly last week we heard from administration there's no data to pick the right number, and therefore 100 is a random number. The lack of data on the cap means we're proceeding with an ill-informed regulation that may or may not achieve the desired outcome, but will almost certainly do two things. Discourage people from buying residential properties and buildings in Hinton. When you make owning a property less attractive, you can't expect to get more of it. Two, private operators from investing in our tourism industry, an industry that brings investment, jobs, tourists, and dollars to Hinton. Some folks won't come unless they have appropriate accommodation. Remember, each STR brings hundreds of dollars per night into our economy, and this helps keep restaurants, stores open. Think about the math. Each one of these brings in $400 to $500 per night times 100 nights per year, $40,000 to $50,000 per year. So every 10 of these that you discourage, you're keeping a $500,000 away from the Hinton economy and growing the economy. That's more of a certain thing than what you're going to do with this regulation based on the lack of data that we're doing. Let's solve the housing situation by building more houses instead of depriving property owners of the rights through short-sighted and ill-informed regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, the motion on the floor is that council remove section 4 from the draft bylaw. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm seeking clarification and then I'll reserve a comment, please. If Councillor Taylor could clarify that his intention is simply to not have any indication of any kind of cap at all and just to leave it wide open.
Councillor Taylor, would you like to respond to Councillor Magoon's question?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, but I'll comment on it. At this point, then I won't be in support of the motion on the floor. For myself, there's a few concerns, and I'll save some of them for later on. But what I will speak to is some of the things that Councillor Taylor had mentioned. First of all, Councillor Taylor had mentioned that, you know, with these units, there was no data to support the fact that this was impacting our rental market. Well, I don't think that's true. First of all, if you go to Airbnb as an example and you plug in a couple of nights in Hinton for a 3-person family, as I just did, the first 4 units that appear are all really what could be classified as low income or low cost housing, in this case, 4 trailers. So for myself, that's indicative that the Airbnb market is at the very least encroaching on the lower tier housing in the community. So to say that it doesn't impact it, no, it does. The problem is that the supply is low and you have everybody who's fighting for a piece of the market. So the question is, what's fair? What's the fair balance, right? Those people who are seeking long-term housing or those people who are looking to, you know, be entrepreneurs and invest in a piece of property and benefit from that, which I think is reasonable as well. I think the real question though is, where's the balance at? And I don't think the Wild West approach of not having a cap and just letting the market do what it will is actually appropriate in this case. For myself, not anecdotally, I've had a neighbor who's pushed out of the community due to this. So that's, for me, myself, with respect, that's not an anecdotal story. That's a realistic story. So the moment we start to lose families because they can't find housing or they don't have the purchasing power of investors coming from outside of town and purchasing 6, 7, 8 houses for their own benefit, that tells me that we're out of balance. Now, it's a tough thing to find, and I agree. We don't want to just throw darts at the dartboard and try to pick numbers. But the question is, where is the fair number? And that's harder to find. I agree with that. And I've struggled with this. So, you know, a motion that simply doesn't put a cap on it, I have a problem with. Further to that, the economic investment, it is true that short-term rentals bring in economic investment to town for those, say, 100 nights a year that a successful STR has people coming into the community. I don't think that's of the same type of value as when you have a house that's, you know, lived in 365 days a year by a local family who's investing in the community. Those are two different arguments. I don't think that one's better than the other, but I think that they're two different arguments. And again, it speaks to the difficulty of obtaining that balance between people who live here locally and the economic opportunity afforded by short-term rentals, especially as it relates to our tourism industry. So again, I won't be voting in favor of the motion on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too won't be in favor of this. And the reason for is some points were brought up about, and I mentioned this during the committee meeting, but back in 2022, when we first had this look at proposing a bylaw, there was 75 non-principal. We're now up to 130, which puts us at about 22 a year have increased over the last 2 years. So 22 a year have been increased to the non-principal. So that concerns me without a cap. The other thing that concerns me is, you know, as devastating as it was to Jasper, how much more enticing would it be to have possibly an Airbnb in Hinton near Jasper? So if that is the case, then we might see an increase of even more of those. So it's our responsibility as a council to look into the future of what could happen and what is a fair balance, as Councillor Magoon said. And I think having no cap is not responsible decision-making for the future. One of the first things that people look at whenever moving to a new area is they look at the housing market. And, you know, right now on that housing market is only 43 places. And some of those, you know, are more lower income than others. So that concerns me that if we were to see an increase of Airbnbs, what is that going to do to what is available in Hinton? I mean, I know two councillors or mayor and councillors on our retention committee for trying to retain and attract healthcare members, that is that going to affect them and their work if the housing is less? We already know of two apartment buildings that have been bought by private owners to put in their workers, which unfortunately then evicted the current people that were in those apartments because they have to have housing for their employees. So that's not a trend that I want to see continue. And I'm worried that, you know, if we keep seeing that, you know, we're destined to have zero occupancy, and that's not where we want to get. Now, we know that development, yes, is the answer. This is just one of the pieces of the puzzle that I think we need to consider. Development is another one, but it's one that's not an easy hurdle. We've heard it across Alberta. The costs of building, getting developers to come in and invest is very difficult, you know, and so we got to do what we can at the local level to do what we can to make sure that we have homes available. So, and I know there's arguments saying, but I can't see how an Airbnb is not digging into those first-time home buyers and people coming into our community, how it's not digging into that. We're already seeing it. I see it on the market. I watch it on a daily basis, weekly basis, and I see small homes that could be great first-time buyers. It could be people that are looking to get established in Hinton, and they're sold, and I follow up and they're an Airbnb. You know, and so that's concerning to me. So I won't be in favor of this. So there needs to be some regulation on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to be speaking in favor of the motion either. I think I'm open to having a discussion about what the appropriate number of a cap is, but I'm not going to support anything that completely removes the cap. I think there needs to be a cap in place considering the housing market right now and the conditions that it's placing on the community. Again, I know it's anecdotal, but I have a family member whose extended family lives in Hinton. He was born in Hinton. He's lived his whole life in Hinton. He has a young family now, and he just a couple weeks ago moved to Edson. And when I asked him why, he said he can rent a whole house in Edson for the same price as he was paying for a 2-bedroom apartment in Hinton. So he can't not. So now he's moving further away from his family, further away from his support system, because he's looking at the economic advantage of trying to be able to get ahead by getting a bigger property for less money. In my day job, we recently had a posting for a lead hand position. We had a lead hand hired. They were ready to come here and they backed out last minute. And the reason they gave was that even though they'd be making more money by moving here and taking on that position, the difference that they would have to pay in rent between what they pay now and what they would have to pay in Hinton would eat up all of that increased salary plus some. So they had to turn the position down. So these are the realities that we're facing. These are the realities that we're looking at. And I've had people tell me, even a couple tonight, that's not the first time I've heard, well, we need to incentivize new home construction. The unfortunate reality, though, is the price point of new home construction doesn't match what people are looking at to buy short-term rental units. As Councillor Haas said, the vast majority that are getting scooped up and turned into STR are the homes that would be entry-level homes for new families, young families in our community, the $350,000 to $450,000 homes. They're not turning $650,000, $700,000 homes into STRs. There's a few, I grant, I know. There's a few, but most of them are the $400,000 units. That's the ones that we need to keep the young people, the young families in our communities. They live here, they've got roots here, they've got history here, they want to stay here, they work here, but they feel that they have to move somewhere else because it's just not economically advantageous for them to stay here. It's unfortunate, and I wish there was a different solution. We're working on other solutions. You know, we've talked about incentivizing. We've talked to developers. We've done all kinds of things to try and get it so that there is something, but there does need to be a balance, and I can't see that there can be a balance without some kind of a cap in place. That's why I can't support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will not be supporting this motion. I have so many questions from realtors. I have questions for you. I really appreciate you coming in tonight, giving us some answers. I have questions from citizens. I have asked administration for comparators, and that was just a week ago, so obviously I don't have that. So I just have too many unknowns to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Taylor.
Oh, yeah, let me provide a clarification when I say no data. Like what? I haven't seen the numbers that show what percentage of our STRs are affordable housing. So I haven't actually seen that data to be reasonably no, but I suspect the number is relatively low. The recent Okanagan experience indicated the regulation has not led to significant increases in rent. Kelowna and Penticton both have had significant numbers of Airbnbs and Verbos. They were affected in the spring of 2023 when the BC government introduced significant STR regulations that clamped down on these. What followed was a significant drop in tourism, including restaurants starting to close, and there was no noticeable increase in affordable rentals or housing. The tourism also dropped, like I said, in Penticton, where the new Airbnb rules applied. But what was noticeable to the Chamber of Commerce people there is right beside them in West Kelowna, where the rules didn't apply, the tourism didn't decrease. So a lot of people want to travel, want of people want unique, personalized accommodation, and they won't travel if they have to stay in a hotel room. So other places are experiencing these kind of reductions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
Just for clarification, because I think good tools can, especially with regulation, are specific tools. One of the things that's been hammered home to me over the last especially the last year with our real estate agents who've been visiting us at the school, is the discussion around how prices of housing above a certain value are not moving as quickly as our housing, at a more entry level affordable price. So I certainly could be swayed if council is to give this a little bit of time and not proceed with all three readings this evening. I think that's also an aspect of good regulation that we could look at too, is understanding what parts of the market aren't moving and don't need regulation in the first place. So that's something that I think is connected to Councillor Taylor's motion that I hope we could explore if we don't rush through this over the next, this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you. I'm just gonna one more comment on this, and that is in regards to the tourism. Yes, our community needs tourism, but at what cost? If we don't cap this, we have tourists coming in, but we don't have the people that are in our restaurants to work those restaurants to serve those people. If they don't have, the word is, and the reason, one of the things, the reason in the service industry, they bought an apartment building for that very reason, is because they needed their workers to have a place to live. So there has to be a balance. The tourism is fantastic for our community, but if we don't have the workforce in those, it's not balanced well. And we're hearing it all over and over. We're hearing it at this table. And one of the things that we want to do is keep young people in our community, but also attract new people. And if there isn't a place to live, they're not coming here. They're going to Edson, they're going to other places, which Edson is also, I understand, very they're finding it difficult too for housing as well in their community. So, it just, again, I can't support a no cap. We need to have a discussion of what's a reasonable number. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, the motion on the floor is that council direct administration to remove section 4 from the short-term rental bylaw 1162 TAC 1. Is there any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Taylor voting in favor by hand. And that motion is defeated 5-1 with Councillor Taylor voting in favor. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, it's not my favorite way of doing this, but I'd like to make the following motion and then I will speak to it. I'd like to direct administration to amend the short-term rental bylaw to include a cap of 130 non-principal residence short-term rental units. And then if I could speak to that as soon as admin.
Go right ahead. Speak to it as it's getting typed up, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For myself, this is one of those motions that exemplifies the compromises the art of making everybody as equally unhappy as possible. So the issue here, I think, is that we have two competing interests sort of competing for a piece of the same market, which I think everybody can acknowledge is quite small. We're certainly not as large as we'd like it to be. That being said, one of the things I asked the CAO earlier tonight was the concept of, making sure the town is acting as fairly as possible in terms of giving notice to individuals who may be engaged in the short-term rental market, as it relates to the grandfather principle, making sure folks have an opportunity to be engaged as fully as possible. That being said, what I think this does is it offers everybody approximately who's currently engaged in that short-term rental market a chance to be involved while following the regulation that the town of Hinton has already set out. Regulation which exists for a reason. Things related to fire safety, occupancy, making sure that neighborhoods have a chance to be involved in expressing concerns about any units that are problematic. But by the same token, giving those people who want to be entrepreneurs in this particular field who've already been doing it a chance to get on board if they haven't been up to date with their bylaws or following the policy that they have yet. Now, that being said, I want to speak to that because I've had a number of different conversations over the last few days. There's been some people who phoned me up and said, no, I think the number of short-term rentals in Hinton should be 0. And I've had some that said, well, why are you going ahead and putting a cap on it in the first place? Again, both fair questions. You're trying to find that fair balance. So to those people who were speaking about, there shouldn't be any, or you should, in their words, hitting them hard with the sort of punitive measures, I think we have to understand that with the tools that administration has identified, such as the AI identification of street addresses and locations, that gives us a tool to enforce the bylaw fairly, which needs to happen. You can't have bylaw and not enforce it. Otherwise, why have the bylaw? Why have policy? Then what happens, as admin has informed us, is should we have any, forgive the phrase, bad actors, those people who don't want to follow bylaw within the town, there can be punitive measures such as penalties that eventually get levied against taxes. And for those people who think that it's not serious, that they don't have to follow that, those penalties levied against your taxes can eventually come back to bite you, and the town can take you to auction. So this is not something you get to choose whether or not to follow the law. Eventually, this could cost you your investment. So if you're willing to buck the system, that's fine, that's your choice, but you're breaking the law. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for that. But by the same token, we're giving folks a fair chance to get on board, more than a fair chance, because we've already been doing this. But it really is that last line to say, no, this is the way the town of Hinton is going to do it. And then what we need to do is review this in 6 to 12 months and say, hey, look, is this working? Is this doing what we need it to do? Because again, it doesn't do anybody any good if we're, utilizing bylaw that isn't effective or isn't delivering on what we hope it is. So I will leave it at that and seek council support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting the motion. This is an item and the same number, in fact, that I brought forward at Committee of the Whole last week that I wanted to get added and wanted to see it come forward in the draft bylaw this week. And the reason that not 130 was picked, and the reason that I thought it was appropriate last week, and the reason that I think it's appropriate this week, is because that's the number that administration brought to us for how many non-principal resident STRs there currently are out there. I spoke to it last week, and out of a spirit of fairness, I want to make sure that every one of those non-principal STRs that's currently operating has the opportunity to come forward and get licensed and be permitted so that they can operate lawfully. If they choose not to, well, then the repercussions are along the lines of what Councillor Magoon had already spoken to. I think it's an appropriate number, and it gives everybody the opportunity to be able to get on board and be compliant. So I'm going to support it. And thank you for bringing it forward, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will be supporting this. I think it is fair. One reason that I think it's also beneficial is at the time when this bylaw was first introduced, it was interesting because there was no way to measure, to have the inventory. With the last couple of years, companies have now come forward with the ability to, which we're contracting to know who has an Airbnb or what is in our community, so that we have a better opportunity to enforce it, because before we didn't. My understanding is from enforcement, you had to actually book a night to get where it was. This now, with the addition to our ability to enforce this, we can keep a better eye on things. It's still, though, and I guess I will be in favor of this, but it's really concerning that so many did not comply with the bylaw before. I realize you may not agree with it. There's many laws you may not agree with. speeding at a certain, and then the cost of it, you don't agree with it, but you still follow the law, you pay it. If you break the law, you pay it. It still bothers me that so many people didn't have, approved accommodations, but I think this is the fair number and I'll be supporting this. I, however, will be following it up with another direction on another matter, but for now, I'll be supporting this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a good motion, but I cannot support it. I'm still waiting on information from administration on comparables from other municipalities. I want to have a talk about our license fee. Did we make it $100 or $1,500 as a deterrent? For people wanting to get a short-term rental, or has that deterrent now become why people are not paying that license fee? Another thing, and it was said today, this is a business for people. It's a business. It's not a home, it's a house, and they're using it for a business. Sorry for turning my back on you. So do we charge them commercial rate? Do we tax them as a commercial business? Or do we continue to tax them as residential? They're running a business. So should it be commercial? I have so many unanswered questions. I need to make the right decision. So it's a good motion, but I cannot support it.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Taylor.
Appropriate number. Well, the number that would be appropriate to me would be the number that achieved the objectives that we're trying to achieve. That could be done in a proven data-based approach. That perhaps might be the appropriate number to me. We seem to be taking a very restrictive approach to this cap. We're going for low-end numbers, one point in time, and we're forgetting that the STR in the real estate market is a cyclical, self-regulating industry where the number is going to change from year to year, decade to decade. Why? I realize a number of you want a cap to take some comfort in such a number. Well, why pick a restrictive low number? Why not pick a higher number, like say 200 or something like that? And that allows, us to claim, that would allow us to perhaps collect a little bit of data and understand what's going on with the SDR and how it's affecting our objectives, rather than doing it blindly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And Councillor Taylor, I'd just like to point out that real estate is in fact not a self-regulating industry. We are in fact here to regulate the real estate in our community. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's a couple reasons that I'm not saying I wouldn't support or consider a higher number, but off the top of my head, these are the reasons why. Currently, and with the amendments in the bylaw, there's no restriction on the number of principal residence STRs. So they can, anybody who wants to have an STR in their home, feel free, knock yourself out. The only thing we're limiting is the non-principal short-term rentals, and we're limiting it at 130, which is higher than the number given to us by administration than what's currently out there. So I actually think that that is a generous number. On top of that, if it turns out that for whatever reason, that number was misjudged or misguided, this bylaw can always be reopened by this council, by next council, by whatever council, and that number can be adjusted. It can be made higher, it can be made lower. Once we have information that if it did indicate that the number was 250, if that's what the data said, I would support a number of 250. I have no problem with that. In the meantime, though, in the absence of that data, I feel we have an obligation to do something. We need to pick a number. It's an arbitrary number. I get that. I agree. But like I said, it can always be adjusted. It can always be changed, and we have to start somewhere. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I just should clarify self-regulating. What I meant by that was there are market forces at play that regulate the market. A couple of the market forces that we've seen would be COVID or the Jasper Fire situation. So if you've invested a lot of money or you're thinking of investing a lot of money, you'd have to think twice or put some extra thought after you've gone through a period of time like that. And that will deter, depending on what the event is, or encourage the sort of investment that we see in the market. That was the sort of regulation, self-regulation aspect I was referring to.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, and in trying to sway some of our colleagues that I think might be on the fence, specifically to Councillor Race's comments, it is a lot easier for us to take the 100, move it to 130 and say that was the number that we currently have, rather than starting way out here and moving it back. And I think 130 is very reasonable. We've had people request more than the starting cap that was recommended in the draft policy of 100. Again, it gives everybody a chance to participate who is currently participating, but it also gives us a chance to look at things in 6 to 12 months and say, where is the market at? Again, it's a lot easier to give it a little bit more than try to reel something back in that you've already let grow out of hand potentially. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure that all of council is okay. We're okay with that $1,500 license fee. We know why we did it. We're okay with that. We're okay with the new fines that are coming up, that we're all on board, that there's no questions left to ask. And right now I'm not. I'm not against short-term rentals. My God, we had a beautiful home this summer. It was a short-term rental. I just have more questions than I have answers for. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, well, speaking to that, Mr. Mayor, if I may, again, to Councillor Race, the motion on the floor is specific only to 130, the number of 130. It doesn't address the cost of the business license. It doesn't address any of those other facets that you just laid out. And then second to that, part of what I had said earlier in the meeting is that I think it's important that council not rush through the potential bylaw. The community as a whole needs to hear what the potential impacts of any amendments are, and not to do 3 readings in one meeting. I mean, that's the whole purpose of having 3 readings, whether you're at municipal government or federal government. I say we do 1 or 2 readings, just like we would in terms of, any other level of good governance, and then give the community a chance to give feedback on that and have that transparency, give that process time to do what it needs to do. So again, I really think that 130 is reasonable given what we have, and seek that community input. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is a council direct administration to amend the short-term rental bylaw 1162 TAC 1 to include a cap of 130 non-principal residential units. Thank you, Secretary. Council, is there any further discussion? We'll just wait for it to come back up. Thank you. Okay, Council, the motion on the floor is a council direct administration to amend the short-term rental bylaw 1162 TAC 1 to include a cap of 130 non-principal residential units. Seeing no more discussion, councillors, please vote now. Councillor Taylor, have you voted? I'm not getting a result here. Secretary, are we getting a result on your end? Can we call that again then, please, or push it out again? Okay, council, please go ahead and vote again. And that motion is a tie, 3-3, so it is defeated with councillors Haas, Magoon, and Ostashik voting in favor. Councillor Ostashik.
I find this interesting that this has now happened 2 meetings in a row where a number has been put out there, but because there's an opinion of a certain number of councillors who don't agree with the lower cap value, it's been voted down, which by default now has made that number, instead of 130, 100. So I'm not sure where to go from here, but if it stays where it's at, the number's currently at 100, which I think to me is the second best option. I prefer something higher. I tried last week and I tried again this week, but anyway.
Councilor Ostashik, I think to your point, very valid. We've had some robust discussion on this point, and it does appear the council is split and we're stuck at 100. Does council have any interest in moving the rest of this forward? Councilor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to take a crack at this, and I'm looking to administration if they need to change the wording on it. But I'd like to direct administration to amend the short-term rental bylaw 1162-1 to exclude apartments from being approved as STRs. And I'll leave that with our CEO if he needs to reword that, but I want to speak to it. It's been brought to my attention that we have apartment buildings that are renting out STRs in their buildings. My understanding, I thought they were not would not be able to under the bylaw, but as it turns out, that isn't the case. And it concerns me. I've known people that are living in buildings who, at the time, were brought to their attention Airbnb, and were very uncomfortable with the fact that they were renting their home at the time, and they have strangers walking through their building, every couple of days, different people. The whole purpose of apartment buildings is to have rentals, and to have the best of both worlds, I don't agree with. I think that's just an opportunity to make money on one unit or more than one unit. It was also brought to my attention there is another space that we actually rezoned to be both commercial and residential that is also being used as STRs. So there is, I think, 3 to 4 places that are also taken off the market of rentals for STRs. I do not agree with that. If you want to have a STR in your home, that's one thing. If you want to have non-principal, that's the one thing. But to me, digging into the rental, the purpose of those units is for rental. We have many people in our communities that need those rental spaces, and taking them up as Airbnbs. I hope the rest of you also agree and support this motion. And again, I don't know if the wording is correct, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
CAO Panasic, can you speak to the specificity of this wording?
Through the mayor to members of council, we can, I don't have any concerns over the wording. We will have to go back, make sure that all of the definitions are in alignment, but I think this motion's clear on the intent. We'll certainly have to go back into our land use bylaw, make sure that all the definitions are lined up. In my understanding of this motion is it's for apartments specifically and not referring to general residential multifamily, correct?
Correct.
So CAO Panasic, can you just confirm that is a type that is identifiable and enforceable in a bylaw? Okay.
Sorry. Buildings, and we do know that we have had requests for STRs in some of the condo buildings. However, we do require that they receive consent from the landowner or the registered landowner, or either the manager. And we have heard that there are a couple places where they're no longer allowing them, and those include on Mountain Street, I can't think of the name of the apartment building, or the Carriage Lane condos. That would be one where we know that there had been some people that looked into doing that, and their board is not, they're not supporting it. So.
CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor and members of council. So if we don't specify apartment buildings through our zoning bylaw, then we would likely have to look and bring forward a definition that would suit this. If this were to pass, we would also bring forward likely some supporting amendments to ensure that there's some clarity on what an apartment is. So we can regulate that through the short-term rental bylaw, but I think the intent is clear.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Ostashik.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to request that maybe you go to Councillor Hawes so he could provide some clarification, because I didn't think that his original motion was including condominiums, because that would affect how I might vote on this.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik.
Thank
Put
you.
yourself back in the queue, please. Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, my understanding is the condominiums have a board they can go to, and if they say no, then it's a no. My concern is apartment buildings that don't have boards, that have owners and that are taking units to use as Airbnbs, whether it, for whatever reason. That's the units that I'm referring to, is those apartments. And so that are apartment buildings, and then other areas that are built purposely for rental apartments. So condos is totally, I'm not interested in that. If the board wants to have a Airbnb in a condo, then that's up to them. If Carriage Lane wants to have, that's up to them. I'm specifically speaking to apartment buildings by owners. If that, does that clarify? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification, because to me, a condo is different than an apartment. Condos are individually owned and they own title to it. It's their property, they own it. If the condo board is okay with having STRs in the condominium complex, I don't know that it's our place to tell them that they can't. To me, that's the same as a single family home. Apartment buildings, though, I agree, and I will support this. I think apartment buildings are specifically designed and historically been available exclusively as rental housing in the rental market. I do have a question though, and it's probably for Councillor Hawes. Are we talking about apartment leaseholders who are listing their leased apartment on short-term rental sites and leasing it out or renting it out when they're not there? Or are we talking about the actual owners of the apartment building who are listing some of their apartments on the STR platforms?
Councillor Hawes.
So my understanding is it's the actual apartment building. One in particular apparently is St. Regis, and they have an actual button that there's 2 or 3 buttons that have Airbnb on it with it, and it's there creating those apartments are Airbnbs. So it's not a leased person it is the owner of it. Even if that is the case, though, I think that to me, a leased person that goes and rents an apartment and then it rents it out as an Airbnb, to me also isn't, for myself, kosher as well, because then it's then again eating into that market value or that rental market for their own profit. So I'm not sure, that's where I'd like to let administration kind of dig their teeth into it to look at what's happening. But my understanding, that's the case, is it is the actual apartment building owners that are renting it out as Airbnbs. So.
Councillor Ostashik.
I appreciate the clarification. Can I ask administration a question?
You may.
So to administration, is there any way that an entity could decide that they want to own a building and have it exclusively be short-term rentals, like a short-term rental, a building where every unit in there is available for short-term rent?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, I don't see why not, unless you're getting into the definition of a hotel. With that type of action, those are going to be regulated through our land use bylaw. But if Ms. Walker, if you have anything else to add on that, but I think there's a possibility that you are going to get into crest into another definition of a hotel. So I know that used to be an issue from a planning perspective when it came to bed and breakfasts, and it depended on the amount of rooms. I sitting here right now, I don't know what those regulations, how they would mesh with, whether that would crest the definition of a hotel and therefore be, taxed and, taxed at a non-residential mill rate. So that's something that we would have to look into a little bit closer.
Okay, I'm fine with that for now. No further action.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know what? I think this is a good motion. However, I can't base my vote on this is what and no disrespect to Councillor Hawes. This is what I've heard or someone has told me. I need to know, fact that this is actually going on. And I'm not getting that right now. So.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you. Whether it's fact or not, a bylaw is to protect certain things in our community, and this one is housing. And whether it's a story, whether it's not, I don't want Airbnbs in those rental units by this bylaw, is what I'm suggesting. So to wait and find out if it's true or not, if we do, then it opens that possibility they could in the future. And then we're back to square one, as Councillor Magoon said. All of a sudden now we have somebody in there and we got to pull it back. So what I'm saying with this motion, I don't need any specific data. If we are going to look at STRs, we're saying 100 can be in our community non-principal. You can have as many as you want. This is saying that I would like administration to look at to make and exclude that apartment buildings do not become Airbnbs. That's what I'm asking you to do. So I'm not sure if you want them. If you want them, then yeah, vote against it. But that's what I'm saying in this. This bylaw is to look into the future. What could happen? What could impact our housing market, our rental market? To me, this is one of those things. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I kind of like Councillor Race. I do need specific data, and I don't want to base my decisions on your hunches. So if we're going to not allow people to have STRs in apartments, why? Because it annoys them? The reason hasn't really been clear. If it's related to a third-party externality like parking, noise, traffic, something like that could be regulated in a regulation. Private property rights are just too important to be altered based on hunches and arbitrarily. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I might remind you that private property rights go with zoning, and residential zoning does not allow for commercial businesses. Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, I take exception to a hunch. We're taking a look at growing our community, and some others have used anecdotal things. I'm going to do too. I have 2 children, cannot live in this community because they can't rent. They can't afford the rent. They can't, and have moved to other communities. And I'm fine with that. I want them to grow. I want them to learn, but there's many other communities or many other people in the same boat. And if you're suggesting that a hunch that to know whether we know this is happening or not, we are debating on short-term rentals in this community. If you have no problem taking rental units away from our young people and other people to come into our community, by all means, vote against it. But I'm looking into the future saying, look, this is a no-go zone. You are not putting Airbnbs in rental for exactly the same reason as Councillor Stashik said. What stops them from taking an entire apartment building and says, I'm going to make it all Airbnb? So now all of a sudden we're digging into more. What I'm saying is I'm looking into the future as a possibility and saying, no, in the town of Hinton, we don't want Airbnbs on our rental units. We have a hard enough time with rental units, whether it's apartments, whether it's housing, and to even suggest that you want to allow to take those rentals away astonishes me. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you. Yeah, to me, it's not based on a hunch. It's based on what is happening, what could be happening, and it doesn't really matter whether it is or could. It's something that could happen. That's why I asked the question about what happens if an apartment owner decides they want to turn the whole thing into STR. So now all of a sudden, are they not in the right zoning anymore? Are they now a business where they're running an ad hoc hotel in a residential zoned area? That's not appropriate. And bigger picture though, I support this because apartments are one of the last few available resources that are affordable for people who need to live and work in our communities that may not, they may not be at the income threshold where they can consider purchasing or renting a house or even renting a condo. Even condos are getting quite expensive on the conventional rental market. Apartments are too, but it's one of the last available lower rent options for people who need to be able to live here, and taking that away and giving the opportunity to make those to be STRs, I don't think is appropriate. So I am going to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and I would respectfully say that I don't think it's fair to characterize some of the opinions surrounding Councillor Hawes's motion on the floor as hunches. It's rules. There's a difference between a hunch and a rule. And in this case, I support the motion that's on the floor insofar as the fact that those rental units and apartments are some of the lowest priced accommodations for individuals or families that we have in town. So I think really the question is, do you think it's appropriate that some of the lowest priced accommodations in town are utilized and are soaking up some of that very small market that we all talked about regarding rentals? And in this case, I would agree with Councillor Hawes. I don't think it is appropriate. That's thing one. Thing two, though, this is now the second time that we've had a comment about council or a councillor's not ready to vote on a particular motion because they're awaiting additional information or additional data. Then respectfully, then council shouldn't have brought it back to regular council. There was plenty of time between at last council's meeting for a councillor to request that additional information or to make a motion to defer this or to table it or to bring it back to a committee of the whole. And I recognize I wasn't at that last council meeting, but in going through the minutes, I didn't see that motion anywhere in there. So again, if council's ready to talk about it, then vote on those motions and make decisions about them. Or tonight, you still have the opportunity to defer this and bring it back to a committee of the whole meeting. That's also within council's purview. Because again, I don't think we should rush through legislation, because legislation that's rushed through tends to be bad, or those are the times when we tend not to get it right. So I would just recommend council take your time, make sure that you're comfortable. But if you don't think this is the venue, then bring it back to committee of the whole, get the answers you need, and then be ready to vote on things like number of units, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor, through the members of council. I just wanted to confirm that that would be considered a hotel if somebody were to buy an entire apartment block for the purpose of providing short-term rentals. So that would be considered a commercial business. They would have to come in, they would have to apply for rezoning.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know what? Being a counselor, we have to come in, we have to be very objective. We have to listen to both sides. We have to be open-minded and listen. And in listening to Councillor Hawes speak, Councillor Magoon, you've changed my mind. I am in agreement with this. I don't need anyone saying, I think it's a fact. I will support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just, for a reminder to council and maybe for Councillor Magoon's benefit, there was a motion to direct administration to come back with additional information at a future report so that this conversation can keep going. But one of the things that came out of that conversation was that it may not have been supported because some councillors feel it's important to get these amendments done and get an amended version of this bylaw that more aligns with what the community is looking for and what council supports, to get it on the books and then have an additional conversation down the road when that future information becomes available. So if there's, any other information, any other data that council needs to help support that report when we have the future discussion, I'm more than happy to support a direction from a counselor tonight to add some more things to that report that's coming back to council at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Taylor.
Just a clarification as to what I meant by hunch. I meant an intuition based on based on intuition rather than known facts. So when Councillor Hawes said that it's his understanding, it didn't sound like he had known facts to base some of the statements he was saying. So that's what I meant by a hunch. Does the mayor want to clarify my comments again?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And just to remind all of council, Councillor Hawes did mention that there were 3 apartments with Airbnb as the tags on their buzzer system. So that is more than simple anecdotal data. Councillor Hawes.
Yeah. So the fact is, I don't want Airbnbs in apartment buildings, period. That's my fact. I think it's wrong. I think it's double dipping in a way. You're getting long-term rentals, and then you're also getting Airbnbs, you know, and the income from that. But by doing that, you're taking away a rental unit that somebody needs in our community. So the fact is, whether people told me or not, I would want that to be excluded from this. That's the fact, because I don't think it's right. And I think that we have to protect that lower rental units for our community, because it opens up the door. Because I mean, my next question to the CEO was going to be, okay, if I take a whole apartment building, but then how many apartments would not warrant it being a hotel and wouldn't need that rezoning? Is that 5? Is that 10? Is that out of 20? Like, because then you've got that too, right? So what I'm saying is I don't want to see them as Airbnb. So that's a fact.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to exclude apartment buildings as short-term rentals in bylaw 1162 TAC 1. Is there any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried 5-1 with Councillor Taylor voting against. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try one more time to see if maybe some of my fellow councillors have shifted their opinion, but this will be the last time. I would like to make the motion. I'm sorry, I have to get the right document up here. That council direct administration to amend the short-term rentals bylaw number 1162-1 to include a cap of non-principal residence short-term rentals of 135. I've spoken to it. Again, I'm just trying to get a majority of my fellow councillors on board, and we'll see if this works. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Just going to let that get typed up for a second here. It's residences, not residents. Okay, council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to include a cap of 135 non-principal residents to the STR bylaw 1162 TAC 1. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll support this, the same reasons I supported the last one. I think it's a fair and equitable opportunity to allow everybody who's currently got a non-principal residence STR operating to be able to get licensed and permitted. I did have a question for administration.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure, this Director DeBeaudrop's not here today, but last week at committee, he mentioned that non-compliance came with other administrative enforcement measures other than just the fines, and that they wouldn't be able to just continue to operate on an ongoing basis and just keep collecting fines until action was taken to seize the property and sell it for unpaid taxes. Can administration remind us what those additional administrative enforcement actions are?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council. So typically when we're talking about additional administrative actions, you're really talking about stop orders. And usually that's more particular for development. I would have to take a look at what those particular abilities for us through a municipal bylaw to enforce that. When it comes to short-term rentals, I think there's some nuance there that I don't want to speak out of turn. But that will certainly determine that fine schedule is what, generally speaking, because if you are going to find somebody, these are businesses that are easy to take off platforms and put back up. So if somebody were to take off the short-term rental unit off of the platform, they're not likely to get another fine because they're no longer operating. So that is one unique enforcement measure when it comes to this bylaw. But when it comes to stop orders, we would have to get an opinion on that.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Stashik, follow up?
No, I did have one, but I'm going to leave it at that because it sounds like administration's unclear on the application of that. So I'll leave my follow-up to a later time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to include a cap of 135 non-principal residents to STR bylaw 1162 TAC 1. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will only speak to something I haven't said so far, but to reemphasize Councillor Ostashik's previous point, is that if not successful, then the default is 100, which I think in this case, again, when we look at fairness procedurally and what I think the town, for myself, should do, I think this creates room to give everybody a more than fair chance to get on board. Other than that, the default becomes 100, and you have really more of these STRs operating than we will currently have in terms of room in the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. So just quickly, we would be going for 3 readings on this, or, first, second.
Councillor Race, you don't need to worry about that in making this decision here. This is a decision to amend the existing bylaw. And then we haven't even discussed a first reading yet.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to include a cap of 135 non-principal residents to STR bylaw 1162 TAC 1. Is there any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is once again defeated 3-3 with Councillors Haas, Magoon, and Ostashik voting in favor. Councillor Taylor.
Oh, never mind.
Councillor Magoon.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that council give short-term rentals bylaw number 1162-1 first reading as presented.
And Councillor Magoon, is a reminder, we did have Councillor Haas' amendment to the bylaw, so it was amended.
Sorry. Yes, please. Thank you. As amended.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. So council, the motion on the floor is the council give the short-term rentals bylaw number 1162 TAC 1 first reading as amended. Any discussion? Councillor Taylor.
I just bring this up in case you want to consider it. I'm not going to put a motion, but the renewal of these things. You want to consider that in this bylaw. There's no statement that talks to the renewal of this. The difficulty with not having a statement about how these things are renewed when you renew your business license is it's not exactly a normal business license renewal. We're talking about something where there's going to be a cap, there's going to be a shortage, and how it gets renewed. It might be appropriate to have some sort of clarification in the bylaw. Just a thought. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And for myself, I am hoping that when this bylaw passes, that we direct administration to bring back follow-on information in maybe a 6-month time period. And absolutely, I want to hear from administration when we start getting close to the limit of whatever the cap is when this finally passes. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, just to speak to Councillor Taylor's question, yeah, that would certainly be one piece of information I'd like to know more about, which is why I'm not in favor of proceeding much further than a first or second reading tonight. And there's other information that I'll request. I want to speak only to your question on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that's a really good point. Not one that I'd actually considered too much. What is a fair way to manage renewal of the existing non-residential the non-primary residents, STRs, when they're getting close so that they don't lose the opportunity to renew if they want to, before we jump to the people that are on the waiting list. Can administration speak to that today? Do they have a?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, we can provide some language even when this comes back for second or third, depending on how many readings that it receives today. But really how it work or how most of these work is that I would be talking if the cap has been reached. So if you are within that cap and you have an operating STR, you have first priority on a year-to-year basis. If you did not get a business license for that year, you would be fined. You would have, I believe it's about 60 days to start. 30 days is typically what business license bylaw fine schedules looks like. We would likely be consistent with that. At that point in time, once it's ran through the course of its fines, you would hit a deadline that would say, once the deadline is reached and whatever that deadline ends up being, if you have not renewed your business license by that point in time, you would be removed from that eligible list. The next person in line with the waiting list would be offered the ability to have a non-principal short-term rental for whatever unit that they've put forward. And the bylaw, or sorry, the unit that had failed to renew their business license would go essentially to the back of the waiting list. In order to get back on a waiting list, you would have to pay all of your outstanding fines. But we can provide some more particular wording for that and possibly for the next council meeting.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Ostashik, follow up.
Nope, good, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Taylor.
Would performance have anything to do with renewal? Like if you had continually had parking issues with the neighborhood, or you had a party house and bylaw officer was there week after week, something like that?
CEO Panasic.
That's correct. There's an ability to remove them from the list for a number of different compliance issues. So if there's a number of different conditions within the bylaw. If you don't meet those conditions and you don't, and there's no willingness to rectify whatever complaint or whatever complaint that might be, then yes, you'd have the discretion to remove them from that list as well.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, the motion on the floor is that council give the short-term rentals bylaw number 1162 TAC 1 first reading as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried 5-1 with Councillor Taylor voting against. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to move that council give short-term rentals bylaw number 1162-1 second reading as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Reyes. Council, the motion on the floor is that council give the short-term rentals bylaw number 1162 TAC 1 second reading as amended. Any discussion? Councillor Magoon.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna
No.
drop out on that.
No problem. Any discussion from the rest of council? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried 5-1 with Councillor Taylor voting against. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Miss Davy Campbell, I just emailed you a direction just to make things simple. And if, Mr. Mayor, I would like to seek the full, or pardon me, make a motion to direct administration to work with local real estate agencies to establish information about where the local real estate about where the local real estate market is most active. Sorry, Jen, you're gonna have to insert market in there. Apologize. And if I could speak to that, Mr. Mayor?
You go right ahead.
Yeah, this is back to that point I had mentioned earlier where I think a sharp instrument is better than a blunt instrument. One of the things I've heard time and again, or at least I think I've heard time and again, is that the executive level homes market in town is certainly not as active as other areas of the market in town. And again, I think the more consideration we can give to this and the more flexibility we can potentially give to any regulation is better. So really, what does that mean for myself? Well, in short, if that's an area of the market where it's not as active, then we shouldn't be regulating it. We should be allowing it to flourish and do as it will. If there's not as many people interested in it, reduce the regulation. And for myself, if it was, and I'm just making a number up, so please forgive me, but if the $600,000 and up level homes are not as active, then we shouldn't be regulating that. If we do have external investors who are coming in and we're not seeing that take up homes that local families need to purchase, then at this point, I don't have a lot of interest in developing regulation around that. If it changes in 6 or 12 months and we're seeing that change, well, then that's a different story. That's why I think we have to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to work with local real estate agencies to establish information about where the local real estate market is most active. Is there any discussion? Oh, CEO Panasic.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, and this is really just a point of clarification, but was the intent of this to be brought forward to council prior to considering the future readings, or is this to come forward alongside the planning or the regulations or planning documents and the comparative analysis?
Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I hate to give this answer, CAO. I think really it's the will of council. If council decides that they would rather just proceed forward with the current amended the current amended policy and consider that in the future moving forward, then, that's the will of council. Personally, I would love to maybe have a look at that information to decide if there's low-hanging fruit that we could amend the existing bylaw with prior to it coming to next council, or perhaps in between second and third reading, again, bringing it back to workshop at committee of the whole, as we would see at different levels of government. I think that would be, again, a task easily done. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. CEO Panasic, did that answer your question?
Somewhat. My suggestion would be that we actually include a little bit more clarification onto when, because that'll make a big difference in we're going to have to bring this document forward. It could be next meeting, or it could be after all of this affects the timing of what we're looking at. I would say that be more specific into the intent and the timing of it. It would be helpful.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Magoon, could you add some specificity around the timing of it?
I can, Mr. Mayor, but it's really going to depend on the intent of council if anybody makes a motion. If unanimous consent is successful tonight.
Well, you know what? Put the motion on the floor. Council can discuss it as we do. And if we need to amend it, we'll amend it.
Sounds good. Then the timeline would be before returning this item to regular council. And then I'll explain my thought process briefly.
Can we clarify replace this item with the actual short-term rental bylaw number 1162 TAC 1, please?
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, and through to Councillor Magoon, would it also be possible returning this STR bylaw to regular council prior to third reading?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would be the intent.
So that'd be, yeah, you could actually replace the words before returning this item to prior to third reading of the short term. Yeah.
And if I could speak to that while that's happening, Mr. Mayor?
You go right ahead.
Yeah, this is really a good chance for me to advocate that this action item end tonight where it is. Again, I think this is a really good opportunity for us to solicit some more feedback from the community. Council has had success while doing that with other larger pieces of local bylaw and policy. I think about the animal control bylaw years ago. That was one of those things where you don't want to rush through it all in once. You want to make sure you're getting as much feedback as possible and perhaps even workshopping it a bit. And the best workshopping happens, of course, in committee of the whole, not, on the fly in council chambers. So that would just be my advocacy point. If council doesn't agree and wants to get on passing it through, of course, that's the will of council. But if that's the case, if council doesn't have the desire to work with this in committee of the whole, it's not often I would recommend something, but I would recommend defeating my motion if that was your standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. And Secretary, the words before returning this item can all be deleted out of that. Yeah, right there, back to there. Thank you. Okay, Council, the motion on the floor is that Council direct administration to work with local real estate agencies to establish information about where the local real estate market is most active prior to third reading of the STR bylaw 1162 TAC 1. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be supporting the motion as worded. If it had been worded to a future committee of the whole meeting, so it would have come back with all the other information that we've directed administration to bring back to help inform future discussion, I would have supported it. But to have it hold up third reading, which just for the record, I don't support having tonight, but I don't want it holding up third reading for an indefinite amount of time while the research is done and this information is collected. I don't believe the information that we're going to get from this is going to be so material that it is going to significantly affect the bylaw as it's been amended so far. And I think it can help inform future discussion, but I don't think it's necessary to inform this iteration of the bylaw. So I'm not supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council, anything further? So for myself, I'm with Councillor Ostashik. I would support this if we amended it to come back to a future report when we get back the land use planning and the comparables report. I think that this information actually would fit in very well with a zoning discussion because the properties that you're talking about, I think, are zoned differently than a lot of other residential properties. They're the bigger lots, the bigger homes have a higher cost value. And exactly what we're trying to do here, I think, is best answered through land use planning. So I would support this if we amended it to a future time, and I'm seeing some nods around the table, so consider that there, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Taylor, up on deck.
Yeah, I was proposing to do exactly that.
All right.
Amend it so that it comes with, I don't know the wording, that it comes when the land use or when the planning stuff comes.
Thank you. And we're going to go look to CAO Panasic for some suggestion on the wording there. So if we're going to amend this, or Councillor Taylor wants to amend this so that it comes back at a future committee of the whole with the additional information requested at the last committee of the whole, how would you recommend we word this best for that?
Through the mayor to members of council, I think we can just say to a future committee of the whole meeting. We just know that we have a number of outstanding items all related to this, so they'll all be included in the action pending list. They'll all come forward at the same time.
Okay, thank you, CO Panasic. So Counselor Taylor, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty and help us get this up on the board here, but the council, the motion on the floor is an amendment to the main motion that replaces the words prior to third reading of the STR bylaw 1162 TAC 1 with to a future committee of the whole meeting. Counselor Taylor, does that? Thank you, Counselor Taylor. Secretary, if we can just capture that that is an amendment that we're voting on up at the front. When I watch this part, I'm always glad I'm not the one that has to do the typing.
Through the mayor, if I could, just while Jen's just putting it up on the board, but we have concern that we do have the ability to issue a cease and desist if the case was that they continue to operate.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Okay, council, the motion on the floor is amendment to the original motion to change the prior to bylaw 1162 TAC 1 third reading. We're changing it to a future committee of the whole meeting. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. And the amendment is carried 5-1 with Councillor Magoon voting against. And that brings the original motion, now amended, that council direct administration to work with local real estate agencies to establish information about where the local real estate market is most active to a future committee of the whole meeting. Thank you, Secretary. Is there any discussion from council? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 6.2 on the agenda today? Councilor Magoon.
Just a question for administration. My assumption would be that within the range of at least 6 months to a year of the final policy being successfully adopted or not, that this would be revisited. Is that an accurate assumption, CAO, or does administration need specific direction from council? Because I know we only review policy, in certain segments and over certain periods of time.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. That's a good question. CO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council. So when it is passed, that can certainly be a motion of council. We can certainly, or we can also include that right in the bylaw that, after the first 6 months after passing that this bylaw will be reviewed. The review schedule is ultimately the responsibility of council to determine when we want to. Going forward, once we have some better data, we're also going to be including this, I think, on a regular basis when it comes to our monthly staffing report, so we can see how we're trending in this regard. So, but until we have, some other things in place, we haven't as of right now, but we can certainly do either.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Council, anything further for item 6.2 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.3, business license bylaw amendment, CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. I will turn this over to Ms. Walker.
Ms. Walker.
Thank you. Yeah, so this evening, the business license bylaw amendment is before you to increase the fines for non-principal residents to $2,000 for the first offense, $2,500 for the second offense, and $3,000 for the third offense. And this will be in the fees, rates, and charges bylaw 2001-1 that will be coming to you next. Administration found at the time that there was an imbalance between what the application fee was for non-principal residences of $1,500 and the fine for them not obtaining a business license was only $250. So we were finding that could be one of the reasons why we weren't getting compliance with these non-principal residents. And so with discussion with council at the last committee meeting, this was the motion put forward for this evening. And questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Ms. Walker, this is one of those areas where I know we discussed this at committee of the whole, but I think it's important to get it on the record at a regular council meeting. So my understanding is that with these fines, if we have individuals who are electing to continually not follow the rules and not get their business license appropriately aligned, that this can be fees that are eventually attributed to the property and to taxes, correct?
Ms. Walker.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer that question.
CAO Panasic.
That is correct.
Thank you, CAO Panasic.
And then just for further clarification, Mr. Mayor, and eventually, again, if you got into a dispute, if an individual property owner said, no, I'm still not paying it, eventually that can lead to, if it gets serious enough, tax auction, correct?
CAO Panasic.
That is correct.
Thank you, CAO Panasic.
Perfect. And I'll just save the rest of my comments for any motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this seems like an opportune time then to ask the question. CO Panasic confirmed that if there are not in compliance, that a cease and desist order can be issued. What are the repercussions for not adhering to a cease and desist order?
CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council. So if someone was to ignore the cease and desist, our next step is to obtain a court order to enforce that measure.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Councillor Stashik. Follow?
Real repercussions? No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Taylor.
I'd like to amend this bylaw so that the business license fee is changed to 165 from 1,500 for non-principal residences.
No, CAO Panasic, can you confirm, is that change in this bylaw or is it in the fees, rates, and charges bylaw?
Through the mayor to members of council, that would be in the fees, rates, and charges bylaw.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Taylor, that's the next item on the agenda then, please.
Thank you.
So council, as a reminder, we're on the business license bylaw amendments, item 6.3, and we've got Councillor Race jumped in.
Mr. Mayor, to CAO, at the committee of the whole meeting last week, we talked about fines being applied to taxes, and I thought you had said it's not like a easy peasy thing to do.
CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, it's not easy or hard. It's just a process that's regulated that we have to follow. So it doesn't happen quickly. But we have to give a lot of opportunities. We have to follow the process through the MGA. So it's not a matter of difficulty. It's just it does take some time to get there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the council give the business license bylaw number 1126-3 first reading as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, the motion on the floor is the council give the business license bylaw number 1126 TAC 3 first reading as presented. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll be supporting the motion. Not why I was in queue though. Just to clarify Councillor Race's question about to the CAO about adding the fines to the taxes and how that's a process that you have to go through. It's not instantaneous. That's why I was asking the question about the cease and desist order and what other measures can be taken. So there are more immediate measures that can be taken to make sure that the people who aren't in compliance get in compliance. If we're going to enact this and we're going to have and we're going to change the bylaw, sorry, my screen closed. Anyway, I think it's important that we have mechanisms in place that are actually real punitive penalties. It's serious business. We need to make sure that that non-compliance leads to significant repercussions for the non-compliers, especially if they're going to continue to do it on an ongoing basis. And I think this achieves that, and the information that CAO Panasic brought forward also helps to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, the motion on the floor is the council give the business license bylaw number 1126 TAC 3 first reading as presented. Councillor Taylor.
I just want to clarify with administration. I saw the numbers presented for fees and fines in this section. Is that part of this bylaw or is that part of the next one? Because in this information package that I got given, there's information on dollar value. So I just assumed it was part of this. Or is this just a sort of a business license bylaw amendment that doesn't include the cap, that doesn't include dollar amounts for fines or for fees?
CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, that's correct, and our apologies. I see how that can be confusing, but we included it under the business license bylaw because essentially what we're doing through this business license bylaw is just referring all the fees, charges, fines to a new bylaw, and that's our new master fees bylaw. So we did include it in this section as well, just to show that there was some alignment, but in the next item of council, we will be discussing that bylaw individually.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. You have anything further?
Yeah, well, in that case, I can support this. I mean, I do support regulation of SDRs. There are certain aspects, as you know, I don't support, but have business licenses and follow basic rules, I think is something like parking and noise and things like that, I think is get safety inspections. I think it's something that's worthwhile. So I will support it.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, once again, the motion on the floor is the council give the business license bylaw number 1126 TAC 3 first reading as presented. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. That motion is carried unanimously. Councillor Stashik.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that council give the business license bylaw number 1126-3 second reading as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, the motion on the floor is the council give the business license bylaw number 1126 TAC 3 second reading as presented. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. And at the request of administration, we will stop the readings of the bylaw at this point. Is there anything further from council for item 6.3 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.4, fees, rates, charges bylaw 2001 amendment. CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to members of council, I will turn this over to Ms. Walker as well.
Oh, excuse me. This is for the fees, rates and charges bylaw.
That is correct, Ms. Walker.
Okay. This is before you guys for an amendment. The first amendment, the original bylaw was put in place a bit ago with all the fire department rates and fees. So the idea with this blanket this blanket fee schedule is that eventually all our bylaws in Hinton that as we go to amend them and renew them or make new ones, all the fees will be generated under one fee schedule so that it's going to be exclusive. It'll be on the website. It'll be much easier for amendments. Then you're not having to go back and amend all these different bylaws. We can just go right to the fee schedule, and it can be done at council meeting without having to go through all the readings, if I'm understanding that correctly. And yeah, that's pretty much what this is for.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Councillor Taylor.
If at first you don't succeed, I'd like to amend bylaw 2001-1. I'd like to amend the business license fee in this bylaw to 165 from 1,500 for non-principal residences, please.
Thank you, Secretary. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to amend the business license fee for non-principal residences to $165 per year. Councillor Taylor, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, briefly. I wasn't here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that this fee was at the higher amount, and it caused what I thought were predictable non-compliance problems with the lower fines. But one of the reasons I think we did this was for competition reasons. And also people indicated that SDRs make too high profits so that they could afford extra fines and fees. That was actually stated during that August 27th meeting. I don't think that's appropriate. We don't even have profit ratios for other types of businesses. And we aren't being considerate to the investment these folks are making. And I don't think the competition, us evening up competition between hotels and STRs is any more a legitimate town concern than evening it up between a pizza place and a burger joint. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my question for administration is just with the motion as it's worded on the floor right now, that wouldn't impact my understanding the fines for not being licensed or operating outside of the bylaw, correct?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor, unless council directs otherwise, no, it wouldn't include the fine schedule.
So then if I may, Mr. Mayor, speaking to the direction or the motion on the floor, I'm actually in support of the motion. I think what I personally am looking for is a tool to ensure compliance with the regulations. And in this case, I think bringing this more in line with a regular business license cost, I'm absolutely good with. But in understanding that the fine for operating outside of that is what it is, and I still feel strongly that people need to follow the law. So thank you.
Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not overly concerned about which way this goes. I would be content if it passes. I'd be content if it doesn't as well. My concern with making this amendment is with a conventional business paying $160 a year for a business license for most of them, they're paying non-residential municipal tax rates. So the municipality's collecting higher percentage tax rates on the fact that they're a business, not a residence. Short-term rental, non-principal, actually, I'm going to back up. I'm going to go to principal residence, short-term rentals. License fee of $165, which is similar to a conventional business license. They're only using a portion of their home to conduct their business, which is short-term rentals or their home-based business. So that I'm okay with. Part of my reason for supporting the non-principal resident short-term rental increased fee was the fact that they're essentially running a business in a residential area and paying residential municipal taxes on the property, not non-residential taxes. So my logic was the increased business license fee helped to make up the difference between what they would have paid as a non-residential municipal taxation and residential municipal taxation. I hope that makes sense, and that's my concern. Like I said, it's not a hill I'm going to die on, but I'm probably not going to support the amendment for those reasons. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is anyone from admin able to tell me if the short-term rental non-primary residence was taxed at a commercial rate, what would it be for 1,000 square foot home as opposed to resident?
CAO Panasic, care to take a crack at that?
Through the mayor, if you gave me a few moments, I could probably find that out, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Councillor Race, any other questions or comments?
Oh, that's good.
Thank you. So council, once again, the motion on the floor is a council direct administration to amend business license bylaw fee for short-term rental non-principal residences to $165 per year. We're just going to give our CAO a moment or two here to answer some questions, but is there any further discussion on this item from council? Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, sorry. I can't speak in favor of it, and the reason being is, yes, to have a home-based business, $165, this is the entire home. And I think that they are two different entities. They're two different matters. And I think that's a reasonable cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, I guess, and I don't want to overtax the CAO because he's crunching numbers over there. But my question for administration would be if I'm running a home business out of my own home, my business license, my understanding would still be $165. Isn't that correct?
CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor, that is correct. The business license would be the same. And speaking to Councillor Race's earlier question, approximately if your home was to be converted to a non-residential tax rate, you'd be paying approximately 42% more in property taxes.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just finish off my
Go ahead,
thought
Councillor
too.
Magoon.
This is, and I'm happy to admit when I've sort of flip-flopped on a particular point because I've gotten additional information or not. For myself, this is about enforcement right now. And I don't think the business fee in this instance should be the best driver of enforcement. I think the business fee is exactly what it is. It's a license for doing business. In this case, the driver for enforcement is the fine that comes after for not following the rules and regulations. And I'm very appreciative of the work administration's done on this. They've invested in some AI software access where we can identify residences who are not following the rules. And we have some much stiffer penalties in terms of not following those rules. And ultimately, we have several different options for enforcement amongst those, and certainly not small, not insignificant, is the tax angle and also the stop orders that can be issued through the courts. And so I think that's really where the leverage comes in. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to amend business license bylaw fee for short-term rental non-principal residences to $165 per year. Councillor Race, you got your question answered by the CAO, about 42% increase from residential taxation on a unit. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors. Oh, Councillor Race.
Just quickly, I want to say my goal here is to get these short-term rentals licensed. I want to get them licensed. That means they get inspected. That means they're safe. So I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So after listening to my fellow councilors, I have switched my opinion as well. I think the point here is compliance. And as Councilor Magoon said, there's other mechanisms to ensure compliance. So I'm actually okay with this. I'm going to support it because I feel it's more important that the currently unregistered non-principal residents, STR, get registered and that they become compliant. And if this helps to do that, I'll support that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. So council, the motion on the floor is that council direct administration to amend business license bylaw fee for short-term rental non-principal residences to $165 per year. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried 4-2 with Councillors Haas and Mayor Nissen voting against. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council gives first reading to fees, rates, and charges bylaw number 2001 dash, sorry. Number 2001-1, not
As amended. As amended.
as amended.
Thank you. Okay, council, the motion on the floor is the council gives first reading to fees, rates, and charges bylaw number 2001 TAC 1 as amended. Is there any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council give second reading to fees, rates, and charges bylaw number 2001-1 as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, the motion on the floor is that council gives second reading to fees, rates, and charges bylaw number 2001 TAC 1 as amended. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Is it coming up for you at all, Secretary? Can you push that out for a revote then, please? Oh, councilors, please go ahead and vote one more time. And that motion is carried unanimously. And once again, at the recommendation of administration, we will not be moving this item forward through any more readings. Is there anything further from council for item 6.4 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.5, land use bylaw amendment. Councillor Magoon.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for administration, and if there's no answer, that's fine. Do we have an anticipated, even rough time frame of when this would be coming back to? My assumption based on the motions would be regular council?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor and members of council, I believe that for the next regular council, I believe we could get it in. My staff isn't shaking their head, so I think next council would be a good timeline.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Magoon, any further?
No, I would just, you know what, to any of our citizens who might be watching or who are in the audience, really what that means is that, you know, we're looking at about a 2-week window to continue to solicit input and concerns, support, thoughts against through that process so that council can take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. So council, we'll move on to item 6.5 on the agenda, land use bylaw amendment, tiny homes, CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, I'll turn this over to Ms. Walker.
Thank you, everyone. This evening, the land use bylaw amendment is before you to introduce tiny homes as an acceptable additional dwelling unit that would be subordinate to the principal dwelling and will not be larger than 60 meters squared, which is approximately 645 feet squared, and will only be permitted within any land use district that permits external secondary suites, including the large lots, the standard lots, and the acreage residential lots. This bylaw is presented this evening for first reading only and is a required procedural step to initiate advertising in the MGA. So tonight administration is recommending that bylaw 1088-20 receive first reading. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question. Could administration explain in layperson terms what would be the difference between a tiny home and a secondary suite?
Ms. Walker.
Well, these would be considered secondary suite. They operate basically the same, other than right now, external secondary suites are allowed within like a principal, or sorry, an accessory building, such as maybe a detached garage. Whereas what this can be is it can be a standalone additional dwelling unit that is subordinate to your dwelling, but can be modular in style, or but it acts the same as an external secondary suite, where you have your living quarters, your cooking quarters, you have your connection to municipal water and sewer, as well as yeah, your eating, your kitchen, and all that. So basically, they're the same. Now you cannot operate them in tandem. You would have one or the other. A tiny home is going to be limited in size. And whereas if you have an external secondary suite that's a garage, that potentially could be more square feet if it's maybe above the garage, or however they decide to design it. But the tiny homes, we feel at this time, introducing them as secondary suites is what we can do right now, and maybe in future we can looking at them as standalone dwelling units on their own lot. But at this time, we're not looking at that. Anything to do with someone wanting to develop maybe a cluster of tiny homes or something like that, our land use bylaw doesn't support at this time. However, that could be something that we look at doing a direct control for that specific piece of property in future. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Councillor Ostashik.
Yep, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Haas.
Thank you for that, because that was along the lines of what I was, because currently right now, so if I were to, because I know there's a company not far from here that builds these tiny homes, are on wheels, take them to places. So currently how this is that if I wanted to build one of those, I couldn't get a lot, but I could find someone who would be willing to, I could park it in their yard. It basically, is that what this is, where it's still a secondary suite? Or like, how does that, I'm trying to figure it out, because the reason I'm asking is because currently right now, there is very little opportunity for tiny homes, and there is quite a market for it, according to the people that build them. And I see them building them very often. So I'm just, is that how it would work if you wanted to have a tiny home in our community with this change to the bylaw?
Ms. Walker.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hawes, through to council. Now, what I think you're speaking of is one that would be on wheels, correct? Not on a permanent foundation.
Yeah.
If we could look at it, if it was, if it had piers and it was also approved through Alberta building safety codes and national building codes. Right now, that's why we are putting a limit on the size, because as soon as you get into smaller ones, we don't know that the building codes are at that level yet to approve these types of homes, because it has to do with egress and access, size of windows, height of your bedroom, and all those sort of things. So we could consider one that maybe is on wheels, but we would have to see what that design would look like, and that it would be more of a permanent. It's not really meant to be like an RV type thing. We would not allow those as any type of RV uses. So
to clarify then, this current change to the bylaw would also exclude those types of homes as well.
Ms. Walker?
as a secondary.
And you're speaking to RVs and things.
I'm speaking to tiny homes that are.
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
definition, we do outline what excludes.
Okay.
And if you had anything to speak to it.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to add that the definition can be found on page 79 of your agenda, and it does certainly specify that it has to be supported by a permanent foundation or a piling system, which is what she was referring to, as well as anything that is being put forward has to meet building code.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Magoon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that council give the land use bylaw number 1088-20 first reading, and that council schedule a public hearing on November 5th, 2024 at 4 p.m. in the council chambers to hear public comments on bylaw number 1088-20. And if I could speak to that very quickly.
Right ahead.
This is again one of those items that council through their strategic plan has worked with administration on trying to capitalize on some of our land development. This falls into the area of, I think, more innovative processes that we can potentially take advantage of. But again, it's important for the public to understand that if you're interested in this, or you want to know what this might look like if it's successful in going through the procedure here, to come to the public hearing, to talk to administration, to find out what this might look like, and then you can voice either your support, your concerns, or how you might be affected by it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is the council give the land use bylaw number 1088-20 first reading, and that council schedule a public hearing on November 5th, 2024 at 4 p.m. in the council chambers to hear public comments on bylaw number 1088-20. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In support of the motion, I can foresee a question that's going to come out pretty quickly though, so I would ask it here. How would the tiny home secondary suite fall under the STR bylaw?
CEO Panasic or Ms. Walker.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ostashik, through to the rest of the council. It actually is described in the land use bylaw, and that was under the, if you see it under the tiny home, sorry, in the definition of secondary suite, external secondary suite.
Sorry, and which bylaw are we referring to? Sorry.
We're under the tiny home report and under the definition of secondary suites in the red line edits.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, if we are to deem tiny homes as eligible secondary suite, I see no reason that with the change that we made to our short-term rental bylaw, that you couldn't put a tiny home on your property and have a short.
You can.
Thank you,
Thank
CEO.
you. That was the clarification I was looking for. These tiny homes will be deemed to be the same as a secondary suite, which if the amendments to the bylaw pass means that they can be used as a short-term rental. Correct? Good. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. That is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Thank you, CEO Panasic. Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, people who want to move forward on this, would they need a development permit? They would, wouldn't they? And do we have the resources, the inspectors, to go out there and inspect and make sure everything's proper?
Ms. Walker.
Yes, I can speak to that. Thank you. We wouldn't be doing the inspections. It would be the building code officers. And we are an accredited agency and we contracted to inspections group. So as part of their building permit application and when they go out to do their inspections, whatever timeline they have, they would be the ones that would be inspecting these tiny homes, these buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just one quick.
Go ahead.
So do you know of other municipalities who are doing this and it's a successful undertaking?
Ms. Walker.
Yes, thank you. It was part of the report that was provided to us from InvizTech, our consultant. They were the ones that went out to all different municipalities and looked for best practices and what other municipalities are doing. And this was what they recommended for Hinton, to at least introduce them into our land use bylaw at this time. This is the sort of an easy win for everyone. And, you know, we can always expand on that in the future if we want to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, the motion on the floor is that council give the land use bylaw number 1088 TAC 20 first reading, and the council schedule a public hearing on November 5th, 2024 at 4 p.m. in the council chambers to hear public comments on bylaw number 1088 TAC 20. Council, is there any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 6.5 on the agenda today? Seeing nothing, we'll move down the agenda. There is no correspondence package this week. We are at section 8, notices of motion. CAO Panasik, are there any notices of motion this evening?
There is.
Thank you, CAO Panasik. And if you could read that motion into the minutes, please.
A motion by Councillor Race that administration brings back a report on adopting the Clean Energy Improvement Program with self-funding options to finance the program in regards to energy retrofits in residential, business, and multi-unit residents to be administered through Alberta municipalities.
Thank you, CAO Panasik. Are there any other notices of motion today?
That is it.
Thank you. I can confirm I was in
My
witness to
mistake.
that.
If you give me a quick moment, I will pull that up. Yeah.
Thank you for remembering, Councillor Taylor. You have that there, CAO Panasik?
Through the mayor, that is correct. I'm just going to send it over and we can put that up into the minutes.
Thank you very much. And CAO Panasik, can you do your duties and read that into the minutes, please?
Of course, through the mayor, members of council, motion by Councillor Stuart Taylor that council directs administration to develop an advocacy briefing note on the grants in place of taxes program that includes a total of the unpaid provincial tax burden.
Thank you, CAO Panasik. And can you confirm that that is in fact now the end of the notices of motion for this evening?
Through the mayor, I believe that's it.
Thank you very much. That will take us to reporting and council reports. We'll start on my left, Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I do have a couple things. Just one quick BBOC meeting recently. We're going through a great strategic plan sessions, the last two meetings, and should be completed by the next one. And I'm looking forward to the new library board or the members of the library board that are joining us. So yeah, that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Race. Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Taylor. Could you turn your microphone on, please? Thank you.
Yeah, a couple of things. I went and did the water slide opening and just pleased to report that the kids seem to enjoy it. Just occasionally, what you do as a counselor can be fun too. I was the first senior down. There's now been 3 seniors down, just by the way. Waste Authority, a few points you might want to know about. Large quantities of waste from the Jasper fires hasn't come to the Waste Authority yet. They're expecting significant volumes in the future. Cell 8 is completed. It's got a 13.5-year lifespan, cost $6 million to to build. Mattress diversion programs working quite well. 2,200 mattresses, 73% diversion. You get charged $20 a mattress, and they make costs on that. And there will be some leachate costs in the future of about $500,000 related to cell number 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And for myself, Council, last week I attended the Rural Health Professionals Action Plan Conference in Wainwright, Alberta, and I had the opportunity to talk to other attraction and retention committee members from other communities across the province. And I can tell you that the work that this council has done setting up the Attraction and Retention Committee of Hinton Arch is absolutely critical to solving our local healthcare crisis. I heard some presentations that give me hope for our communities, and some of these are around programs for educating doctors and nurses and other healthcare practitioners that are moving the education of these professionals outside of the major centers into rural communities. So the U of A today has a program starting up where they are doing the entirety of the medical school program in rural settings, including Grand Prairie, which is still a bit of a city, but rural compared to Edmonton. And they're partnering up with communities just like ours to get clinical sessions, classroom sessions, and other education opportunities in our communities for these up and coming doctors. And the University of Calgary has a nursing program doing similar things. And they're actually, the University of Calgary is in Wainwright and other Northern Alberta communities doing this rural nursing program. The results of which are these programs are giving preferential access to rural applicants. So people who come from our communities get into these programs and they stay in our rural communities with the goal is that at the end they stay in our rural communities to work. I have really high hopes, and the people running these programs seem to be very switched on and well known. So attraction and retention activities continue, and we are absolutely on the right track with what we're doing. So thank you for council for that support. And we will go to Chief Administrative Officer reporting, CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing to report.
Thank you very much. So we will look for a motion to close. Thank you, Councillor Haas.
I'd like to make the motion to go into closed session.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, the motion on the floor is that council move into closed session at 7:36 p.m. And as soon as it's up, we will call the question. Councillors, please vote now. That motion is carried unanimous. Council is in closed session. Thank you, everybody, for sitting around as long as you did. You should leave now. There's nothing more.
I think you're the first that actually stayed.